Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Or national anthem, just hit play. Okay. I don't think so. We need to project. We need to project the program as necessary.
If you project it, won't it cover up this?
No.
Okay.
If we project it, share. I should share the whole share the program.
Just share to people.
Somebody should share it, then I'll ping the person.
Let me share it on Zoom. I'll post it to the chat for.
Capacity building program. For policy.
To ask if it's possible to check if the presentation reads well, because I didn't know how the monitor was.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so look for this. Okay. Is it open yet?
This one, right?
Try and open that one. Let's see. Good. From which organization? Wow, that's interesting. You're welcome. I would like to have your name so that your organization will be recognized.
So I'm actually here on the personal level. I can stay to represent.
You didn't come to represent your agency.
Yeah.
You didn't come to but no
But I
challenge.
can.
Let's
No
still
problem.
welcome.
Do you? How come you have some?
T.
Tongo hyphen
Holy
Yeah.
Spirit.
ATONGO. Thank
Tongo. From where?
Benue.
Your organization?
National Commission for Colleges of Education.
Abuja. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. So how much of the time? It's even gonna.
Oh, you're meant to. Yeah, when you scan, you will see the form, so you fill it.
Oh, okay. That's
The
interesting.
form will just come, click, or maybe.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, you don't need to sign.
I don't think so because I didn't sign up in the first place.
Yeah. So that has to show that.
I'll split the screen.
If you are meant to split the screen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and those guys have gone.
Okay, so sign into my.
Yeah. That means you've never signed in with your phone.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
So can I sit down and do this?
Yes, of course. If you can, yeah, you can. Anywhere.
No boy, you want to make sure that
But I was too much. Right, all participants. National anthem. So is that his presentation now?
No, let me know.
So we'll be very quick fast to remove this and put on DG when it's time. Or you want it to be on?
I'll put him on him.
On
Okay.
him, right?
Just maybe on this thing, and then you put it in. You can hold it.
When you're watching the first one, look, this is what I want to keep. So post in.
Yeah,
Make
that's
your
fine.
profile post.
This is good.
What is this one? I wish I logged in on how
Capacity
I found
building
it. Don't worry, I'm
program.
co-host.
What do you want to do?
I want to be your co-host. And just
Stefano Armenia,
this one.
President of the education system. You're welcome. All right. So, can you quickly from here go to national anthem? You see the thing, right? Capacity building program on system dynamics for policy days, policy model evaluation. Yes, sir. Yes. So help us when we get to that place, better we are there. All right. Is this your own?
So I'm sharing only the audio.
Yes, thank you. I want to start.
Hey, where's the mic? Is it working?
You sure? I didn't even test. What did I put it? I think it's working. It's working. You see that? Oh. Good morning. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I want to specifically welcome every one of us to this one. It promises to be interactive, and I trust that at the end of today, every one of us will go home smiling. And so you're welcome to this awesome program organized by the National Center for Technology Management, NACETEM. And of course, the theme of the program is Capacity Building Program on Systems Dynamics for Policy Researchers. And then today we shall be looking at two key areas. Number one, policy and evaluation, and then two, smart model-based governance. And of course, that will be anchored by Professor Stefano Armenia, the president of System Dynamics Italian chapter. A round of applause for him once again. All right. Okay, so at this juncture, again, I want to welcome to this program Mr. George Moses Uzong, Assistant Clerk, House Committee on Science Engineering, National Assembly. A round of applause for him. You are welcome, sir. We also want to recognize the presence of Ayinde Abdullahi from National Design and Development Council. All right, you're welcome. Again, we also want to recognize the presence of Mr. Modibo Sadiq Ibrahim from Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. A round of applause once again. We also want to recognize the lecturers the presence of lecturers and students of AUST, African University of Science and Technology. Yes, all of you, you're welcome. Again, once again, I'd like us to put our hands together as we welcome Mrs. Doyum Akune Atongo from National. All right, you're welcome. I think I did enough justice to that. All right, once again, I'd like us to put our hands together as we welcome the members of staff of NACETEM Center for Technology Management. But this whole recognition won't be absolutely complete without us welcoming the convener of this particular program. Is no other person than the DG, Director General, CEO of the National Center for Technology Management, the person of Dr. Olushola Odusoya. Please put those hands together. Yeah. Please help me quickly. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Once again, like we say, all protocols duly observed. Today is a conflagration of many things. We are having the conference of the Chartered Institute of Transport Technology, which this agency is deeply involved. Yesterday, I was lucky because my presentation was supposed to be today, but it was brought forward yesterday, so it allows me to sit here all the time. So it will have appeared as if I convince people and I'm not here. But a lot is going on. The people of the mathematics center are also having a meeting. So they are not here, but they are integral to the group that we are trying to put together. Are the systems engineering guys here? Systems engineering from African University. Okay, they'll soon be here, I guess. And this is what we plan to do. So let me give you a brief of the background of what is happening here. We want to convene a group of people who use systems thinking to approach challenges that face us. And I'll explain briefly why it is important that we start thinking within systems and not modular options that we'll be having. You will see, even in our national life, a lot of things are happening that you realize that whatever you learn is not sufficient for you to succeed in a society. And society is a conflagration of many parts where everyone is working together for a particular purpose. Look at a typical hospital. You have the nurses, you have the doctors, you have engineers and scientists within hospitals. Why do you need scientists there? Because sometimes you want to know what is the leading cause of death. And you also want to know what kind of diseases come at a particular time of the year so that you mitigate against such things before the patient actually comes to the front of the doctor. And you see that in the medical field, we are now having issues that people have moved away from just treatment to health. A situation where you plan to ensure that people are healthy so that the number of people who go to hospital reduce in number. And we have several examples of that we have done research on. In this university, at a time, we did some health research where we looked at women who particularly are predisposed to cervical cancer. And we realized that cervical cancer is heralded by a lesion on the cervix. And if that lesion is removed early, then the person will not go to progress to cervical cancer. And a research was built around that based on ICT, to use ICT tools to detect early those lesions and reduce the number of women who end up with cervical cancer and ultimately progress to death. But the interesting thing is that you need to now triage the patients and separate the ones that don't need to go to doctor because you cannot take care of all the women, because 200 million is the population of Nigeria. More than half of that is women. So are you going to be able to do all of that? So you need to separate the ones who have deletions from the ones who don't have deletions. And this is all what systems thinking allows you to do. And we are going to be applying it in very significant ways. We have made some proposals to government, looking at the way the economy is running. We know for sure that one easy way you can onboard a lot of people into the economy is through agriculture. And we know these things that we spend money on in agriculture. We import a lot of wheat, we import sugar, we import rice, and a couple of other products, including rubber. All of these products, Nigeria is capable of producing because we have abundant arable land. More than 60 million hectares of land is available in Nigeria that no human being has set foot on. And this land is available for agriculture. And yet we talk of lack of jobs. We are spending money buying these things that we can grow. Last time we went to Adamawa State to visit our center there, we met the deputy governor, and she told us that there is a beans variety that only takes 58 days to mature. And then if you think carefully about the plan of some people to import food into Nigeria, you realize that by the time you start preparing the LC, they call it, letter of credit, till the time when the beans lands in the port, the one you plant here will have matured, and you start harvesting and distributing. So we therefore now wrote a proposal to government and said, of 10 items that we import, let us plant 1 million hectares of each of those. When you plant 1 million hectares of each of those things, you will onboard millions of people. And that idea that the government had, that some of us criticized initially, that they want to recruit 50 million people, looks like a mirage, will now become a reality. And realizing it's a reality, we need to now also encourage it by ensuring that layers of information are added. For example, if government decides to plant 1 million hectares of sugarcane, the national requirements of sugarcane is 250,000 hectares. So if you do 1 million hectares, we'll have done 4 times that volume. And if you recruit people to do mechanized agriculture of that volume, you need only 4 to 5 people per hectare. So 1 million hectares will be employing 5 million people. The requirement of Nigeria, 250,000 hectares, will require 1 million people. If you onboard 1 million people into the job market today in an active environment, it will have a significant impact in those areas where you have done that. So this proposal is not getting life when we start applying system dynamics. Because, for example, if you grow sugarcane, you will end up having a factory that will process sugarcane and release bagasse, which is the shaft. That shaft produces electricity. That electricity can power an entire community of, say, Niger State. And you can, through that, produce molasses, which feeds biotechnology, producing several fertilizers, bioinsecticides, biofungicides, and so many products. Many of the products you buy from overseas, which include things like formic acid, vinegar, very simple liquids, can be produced as byproducts of one single fermentation of these sugar byproducts. And sugar, therefore, becomes the central part of the economy of Nigeria, which presently we spend about $1 billion importing. So in order to valorize this kind of process, we have decided to put forward this proposal. Welcome, Prof. And the proposal is for us to encourage government to do 1 million hectares of certain kinds of crops that we currently spend foreign exchange to import, reducing the pressure on the hard-earned foreign exchange, and also giving Nigeria opportunity to recruit a large number of people and bring them in. So why is system thinking important? System thinking is important for you to now realize how everything is integrated together. Every bottle of soft drink that you take in Nigeria includes sugar. Every confectionery you take includes sugar. Every product of the pastries includes sugar. I am sure without doing a poll, that more than half of us have had interaction with sugar this morning without even knowing. So this tells us how integrated some of these things are. And looking at other countries of the world, we have done some research here in NACETEM where we ask questions of what did the Southeast Asian economies do that Nigeria did not do that made them successful and we less successful. From the analysis, we basically did everything except one, and that was exports orientation of our industrialization plan. We started at the same time. Our economies were growing at the same time. Populations are similar. Indonesia is very similar to Nigeria in many ways. When Nigeria planned to start its petrochemical plant, it had 10 years advantage over Indonesia. Indonesia started 10 years later. But by the time Indonesia started, Nigeria's petrochemical plants have started failing. Nigeria built one 10 years before Indonesia. Indonesia started 10 years after us. They now built 5 petrochemical plants and started growing. And they ended up coming to buy Nigeria's petrochemical plants. And it's now being owned by Indorama, an Indonesian company. But what they did in those countries is that they focus on export. So their industrialization was export-based industrialization. So whatever they did, they ensured that their products competed in the international market and their economy. We didn't do that. Example is the rubber industry in Nigeria. Despite the growing number of cars and everything we had, we didn't grow rubber to feed that industry. So we are importing raw materials and trying to produce tires. It becomes impossible, therefore. And the same thing happens with Procter & Gamble. They didn't just leave Nigeria because of anything. They left Nigeria because they did not have a plan for exports. They were focusing on selling products to Nigeria, and they did not have an export plan. And that's why it's important for us to have systems thinking, to think, what is happening around the world? How do I fit in into this kind of system? It is not sufficient for us to collect SCI data like we have been doing. We have been collecting SCI data. This is the number of people we need in this industry. This is the potential of this industry. This is the next outcome. But if we don't integrate it to the rest of the world and what the world needs, then we'll be just collecting data and convincing ourselves that we are doing what we have been mandated to do. But if not related to the rest of the world and related to what else is happening around us, then we have failed in that primary duty of collecting the data and making that data work for government so that government will make decisions based on data. One of our failures, again, is that in the African environment, Nigeria example, we do not make decisions based on data. The decisions are usually based on emotions, thinking, and knee-jerk reactions. And we have seen many examples in our lives for us to understand. In recent times, the most critical of all was the decision. Well, it was not a decision at the end of the day, but the proposal to make only people who have attained age 18 to enter university. With systems thinking, you will have inputted the value, you will have seen the results, and you will have known the likely scenario if you attempt to bring about that policy. And that is why it is important, therefore, to begin to train an army of people, not just a few people, but an army of people who are thinking within systems, who are relating things together, who are understanding that this set of data is not by itself. That data, if fitted into this algorithm, will give you a very good stochastic projection of what will happen in the future. So in the next 5 years, this is what will happen. In the next 10 years, this is what will happen. And it goes on and on and on. You know, the National Automotive Council, I know, collects some taxes, TISS or something like that, CISS or whatever it is, 1% of all vehicular transport that comes into your country to develop the automotive industry. By the time you start tweaking that data, you'll be able to project what will happen in the next few years. You'll be able to make projections of what if the kinds of vehicles we are using now revert back to one where all you need is a propellant on the tire and a battery. and you stop having Mercedes-Benz engines and all the things that we know today, and you just have vehicles that move based on new technologies that are available to us, what happens to that revenue and all of that? And we need to start thinking of how to re-engineer our societies. And that's why we want to create this army. And like anybody who wants to start an army, you first start by acculturation to start recruiting their interests. That this army you want to join is because there is a war you want to fight. And that war is a war of ignorance and inability to make decisions that last longer than the time you made it. A decision-making process that allows you to see what your decision today will mean in the next 5, 10 years or more, and how those decisions could relate to others. And you can now tweak it to say, what if the other person makes a decision that is contrary to mine? What happens? So you are now able to be in a position to be able to gauge and guess what will happen. Professor Nwalu, welcome, sir. President, African University. He has a burden of bringing in students to the campus. What if 10,000 students decide to come to AUST tomorrow? A lot of things will need to change. The pressure on the current infrastructure will be high. The pressure on the delivery of the quality that AUST is known for will be affected. And you have to now provide, lots of focus on the university's presence in the minds of people. And a lot of things will have to come into that. Systems thinking helps to solve that problem. So for administrators, it's also as important as it is for scientists, engineers, and all of us. I don't want to talk about your research because you all know why it is important for you to think within systems. Whatever you do is not sufficient. You need to think about systems-based approaches to solving problems. A few years back, in African University, we had the Pan-African Materials Institute. And one of the things we focused on was to bring a collection of people to do interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary research using systems-based approaches to solve 3 problems of Africa. And the problems we identified were problems in the area of health, problems in the area of infrastructure, especially for oil and gas, because that's where Nigeria's money comes from, and problems with power generation in the country. And that led to an unleashing of many patents, as well as degree awards that put AUST in the center of national development in a very significant way. And it is because of that we have chosen this venue. It's not by accident that we are saying we are coming here, because this is a university that is based on systems approaches to solving problems. And we have programs on systems engineering, and we have programs in mathematics that we want to bring together and create a family of people by way of having a national society of systems thinkers. It already exists, but we now have the Abuja chapter, and we drive through the processes. And the good thing is that we have a good friend here, Professor Stefano, who has come to help to strengthen the Abuja family of systems thinkers and to introduce us to the pedestrian way of systems thinking. So in other words, it's going to make it very simple and lure you in. And by the time you are in, we have a responsibility to keep you locked in so that you start thinking within systems. But it's going to do the very creative way of putting you within the realm of systems thinkers. And it is with this, I welcome the President, African University of Science and Technology, Professor Peter Nwalu, our host. I also welcome our guest, Professor Stefano, who will come and start his alluring lecture. And I leave you all to understand. And I'll be here all day because I've been freed from the lecture I'm attending. Thank you very much.
So first of all,
Welcome, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, sorry
Thank you.
for,
Yes, of
uh,
course, they won't hear me otherwise.
please, we would like to make a little adjustment on our program of events today. We have the national anthem. Well, you know, now there is no one method fits it all for everything. We have several methods for everything you want to do. So right now, I'd like us to rise to our feet as we accord that respect to Nigeria as a country. All right, thank you.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our wonders in the world. So in God would be said. Yes, all the say. So be our clothes shall be our sin, for truth and justice reign. In peace our hearts will fall, and peace be found God's day. To all to all children, among these all so
All right, may please be seated. A round of applause for Nigeria once again. All right, thank you very much. So at this juncture, let's put our heads together as we again welcome Professor Stefano Armenia.
Italian anthem. Because you have to reciprocate.
It's okay.
Afterwards.
Afterwards, yeah. So again, thank you very much. As I was saying, I'm not a native English speaker, but I should manage to let you understand what I want to say. First of all, and in order to start with a smile, and not only to end with a smile this session, as it was said, in Italy, we tend to sing our national anthems only in conjunction with football matches at the national level. So, but I really appreciate the fact that, you know, this runs into your culture because it's a very nice thing. So I don't see my presentation here. So if I may have it on the screen here so that I can easily move forward without turning every time, that would be nice. Excellent. Thanks a lot. Yes, ma'am. It's okay. Okay, so I'll try to give you an introduction of systems thinking, and actually I think I have to put this down, right? Like this, more or less. Yes. Or maybe also here. I think there is this one thing bothering a bit, but if I move this way, okay. The mouse is lagging a little bit. Okay, now it shouldn't bother too much. Is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, well, first of all, just to ask, how many of you are familiar with systems thinking and system dynamics? I know a couple for sure. Okay. 1, 2, 3, probably 4 and 5. Okay, so this means that this is also to, you know, set the tone and level of my presentation. You are all students or professors or conveners that know about science and technology, and system dynamics for sure is based on that. But there is, you know, just a little mindset that we need to take forward what it is. So I will try to, let's say, make this idea even across all of the conveners, both here and also online. I will just start by saying that, as it was mentioned by Dr. Shola, actually, there is a real need of interdisciplinarity nowadays. We've been doing things by working them out into silo knowledge so far. And this has brought our world, unfortunately, to a situation where, you know, sustainability has become, and so sustainable growth, and it has become a real problem. And this can be solved, and it is needed, the interdisciplinarity that I was mentioning, this can be solved as a with systems thinking as a mindset. Systems thinking is the qualitative approach that stands beyond system dynamics, which is a modeling and simulation methodology, which you will see. It's heavily mathematic because basically it is based on differential equations. But when you model, you won't see differential equations. And that is the great thing of system dynamics. But systems thinking comes before. So there is the need to understand how to think in systems, how to conceive that even if we are taught to learn in silo knowledge, still there is an interdependence and a domino effect, as it was mentioned, among these various aspects. So yeah, my role is not ideal today because I will have to try to give you an idea of what systems thinking is, how to model also with system dynamics, and also present you with some relevant, how to say, applications. But I will try to do that in the time frame that I'm given. Okay, so let's move forward. I think I always have this in the middle, but it's okay. Let's leave it here, and it's not an issue. I'm gonna go just to give you an idea of what I've been doing, just because at least you know who you have in front. I am now a tenure track researcher with a professorship in business organizations at the Yale University. I've been working for the System Dynamics Society in the last, and into the System Dynamics Society in the last 22 years so far. And I'm the president of the Italian chapter of the System Dynamics Society since 2015. And I know that there are some questions from the Nigerian chapter. The System Dynamics Italian chapter has done a lot during the last 7-9 years in order also to attract funds and apply systems thinking and system dynamics to projects that could potentially, you know, solve some of today's problems, let's say. I have a PhD in management and industrial engineering, but I am an IT engineer, so somehow I also feel home today because there are, you know, many competencies that resound together with me. Okay, so main experiences. Okay, this is not really important. So I've been teaching and doing research for the last, let's say, 20 years in various universities and also scientific societies. I've been doing several research activities, mainly attracting also funds, as I was saying, for my university and also for the Italian chapter and the society by trying to include systems thinking and system dynamics in several research projects, mostly at European level and also at national level. Yeah, if you just Google my name, you should find out some of my articles that you might be interested in, as there are absolutely a huge amount of great articles from the System Dynamics Society and my system dynamicist colleagues. I'm also collaborating with several scientific journals, of course, the System Dynamics Review, another journal from MDPI, which is called Systems, the International Journal of Organization Theory and Behavior, another journal which is called Frontier in Sustainability, and I was also former co-editor-in-chief of Kubernetes from Emerald Insight. But, you know, there are several other journals that I'm collaborating to. Why I'm saying this? Because through the idea of this journal, you can also get the extent of how potentially wide is the application of system thinking and system dynamics. Well, I was also having, together with my university career, a professional career. I was enhancing in the Italian Navy, and I've been working for several public administration and private administration, trying to implement a systemic perspective in order to improve their projects, of course. Okay. I'm sorry, I have included some slides just to present myself. Now, this is the System Dynamics Society. Actually, the guy that you see here on the left-hand side is the person, Jay Forrester, who invented system dynamics. Back in the 60s, he was an operations researcher working for the US National Defense. He was basically producing tracking system to shoot down missiles or aircrafts, etc. So he was heavily working on feedback control systems, as you might know. Then he moved to another application of feedback control into electronics, because he was the inventor of the principal mechanism that stands beyond the current random access memories. So if you have a cell phone, you have RAM into that, and RAM was the principle for RAM was invented by Jay. I had the opportunity to meet him. He passed away something like 5 or 6 years ago. But his mind is still enlightening the system dynamics community. On the right-hand side, we have John Sterman. He's the head of the Sloan School of Management at MIT, Boston. He has somehow taken the legacy of Jay. Well, there are also many other professors and, you know, very good researchers who have taken this legacy. I would need to spend a lot of time in naming them all, but John has, you know, been very also recently important, especially for the negotiation on climate change, thanks also to his activity on a simulator that I would suggest you to try out, which is called En-ROADS from Climate Interactive. I would provide you some links at the end of this presentation so that you can have a look. Of course, there is also the Italian chapter, as I said. This is the old website, but anyway, we are one of the several chapters of the society. The society is built around a main association which is in the United States, but then there are several regional chapters. There is also the South African chapter, which is very active. I'm happy to know that also the Nigerian chapter is now active and with a very good number of people working in it. Asia, Europe, South America, there are literally a lot of regional chapters. And also the society is subdivided also in special interest groups, which are topic-based. So like management, psychology, information technology, and so on and so forth. So now let's start to share some ideas. It means to think in systems. Now, you probably know this guy, also because there is the name, but also, I mean, the picture is unmistakably famous. And actually, what he was telling us was that the problems we have created in the world today, at his own days, will not be solved by the level of thinking that created them. This might appear obvious to a certain extent, but if you think that if we had the skills to prevent those problems, would we create them in a first instance? Of course not. And that's why we need to have the skills to prevent some of these problems. And what are the biggest world problems, or at least some of them, as also reported by a survey done by the Eurobarometer back in 2011. So it's a little bit old, but if you look at the problems, you can imagine that they're still there, all there. Why? Because they are the biggest problems that humanity is facing nowadays. Armed conflicts. We don't have to even name what is happening in the world today, unfortunately. Spread of infectious diseases. Do we have to talk about it? I mean, we have been locked in for ages, some years ago. A growing population. very, very serious issue that we're all facing. The availability of energy, and I know that here in Nigeria, it's a little bit of an issue nowadays. International terrorism, unfortunately, which is spreading all over the world. An economy which is in deep crisis at the moment. Climate change, which is the next huge wave of these big problems that will cover them all, unfortunately, with water. Poverty, hunger, lack of resources, including water, for example. Now, why these problems do persist? Because we have had always these problems. And in years of human knowledge, why haven't we been able to solve them, as Einstein was telling us, or at least to prevent them? Because basically there is an issue with the schooling system. And I think for how good the schooling system is around various countries, in Italy we have a very good schooling system. I'm pretty sure you also have it in Nigeria. But unfortunately, schools, and this is not, by the way, a frontal attack to schools, just the way we have conceived the schooling systems. What happens? When you are around 4 or 5, you keep on asking, and that's the way your brain starts connecting around yourself. So your brain is starting to believe what's happening around you. And you start questioning your father, your mother, of why certain things are happening, and you're trying to connect situations. At the age of 6, at least this is what happens in Italy, at the age of 6, you go to school. And in order to pump up the knowledge, the lot of knowledge that we need to acquire, especially in the first 5 or 6 years, the knowledge is conceived into silo, vertical silo. So you learn math, you learn literature, you learn history, geography, and there, at least in India, has been like that. I don't know how in Nigeria, something that goes across these topics, of these topics. So it's just schooling system where the world function and work. And so if you, oops, I still have again this thing, but maybe from here. Okay. So basically school is able to solve this problem, but does not prepare us to solve this problem. So the United States consume more than 20%, 7 billion barrels of the world's oil supply annually, yet they only have 2% of such supplies. What are the factors that will determine when we will reach the peak oil? So the point in time when the maximum rate of petroleum extraction will be reached, after which the rate of oil production is expected to enter terminal decline. This is not an easy question to reply to and needs some very high-level reasoning behind that, also high-level models. So we need to include, even from the schooling system, a systemic approach. Now, start with some. I don't know if you know Dilbert. It's a famous comic strip in the actually, Dilbert is an moment, and Dilbert goes to his boss and say, hey boss, our online budget approval system isn't working. Then he goes on trying to find a solution because he has gone to his boss with a problem, and so, you know, he wants to be looked as the one who is posing problem but also provides or tries to provide solutions. And so he goes, there's a process for making changes to the system, but I don't know it. And then he goes forward and says, I could take a class to learn the process, but there's also a process for approving classes. I could learn the process for approving classes, but I'd still need approval for a budget variance to take the class. And I can't get that because the online budget approval system is broken. Circularity. We are stuck in circularity. And then what happens? This is the last 3 drawings are the most fun to me. because apart from finding himself stuck, he has to find a solution. His boss is there looking at him. He hasn't said any word so far, and said, well, I can't even have this conversation because it will make me charge too much of my engineering time to administrative overhead. So let's go like this. I'll go sit in my cubicle and pretend to be thinking about a great billable project. And he goes at the end, like, it looks like I'll be exaggerating my accomplishments again this year. So what does he do? He just throws some smoke in the eyes of his boss to try to say, okay, we have a problem. We don't know how to do it, but let's think of how we can make additional money and let's forget about the problem. So what you do, you put the dust under the carpet. The dust of a problem, you put it right under the carpet and you try to forget about it by bringing the attention on something that has a bigger value. But that problem stays there. And when you will walk on that carpet, it will go out of the carpet when you step on it. So this is a very important aspect that leads us, sorry, to the fact that basically we are linearizing situations and we are linear thinkers. We are linearizing what happens around us. For example, in the previous example, from a problem, he was finding a cause, but that cause, he was linearly reporting to another cause because that cause was a problem itself. And so he was trying to linearly reconstruct this. And how many times do we linearly project our ideas or assumptions without taking into account also the surrounding issues that might intervene? The world is deeply nonlinear. Let's have a look at this. Now, let's assume you are a farmer. We have been talking about also farming and rural economies. So at one point, someone tells you that if you apply some fertilizer, your crop's yield is going to increase. Fine. You go, you buy some fertilizer, you apply it. Sorry, I have to step here just to show you. And basically, at this point, after applying this amount of fertilizer, you get an amount of crops. You go on like this for 2 or 3 years, then after a while you say, well, if I applied 1x of fertilizer and I got 1y, let's say, of crop yield, what if I apply twice that fertilizer? You apply twice that fertilizer, and in this range, this relationship is almost linear. Not really linear, but it could be perceived as linear. So once you apply twice the fertilizer, you get almost twice the crop yield. What is happening here? This is reinforcing the idea of the farmer that probably there is a linear relationship, and if he applies the next time 3 times, he could get even more crop yield and then get more money. And he goes on and on like this until he reaches a certain point where this is not happening. And what do you think he would say or would imagine it has happened? Please try to come up with an hypothesis. What would you think when he sees that by applying, several amounts of fertilizer, he doesn't get that same amount multiplier of crop yield? Don't be shy.
Fertilizer will not make any difference.
Yes, that because of course you know the curve, but let's put ourselves into the role of the farmer. The farmer doesn't have an idea of this function, whereas we see it, of course.
Diminishing return.
Yes, but again, this is a very good response. But again, this is a response of a highly educated person from the university. The farmer would just think that he made a mistake. What the hell? I'm not getting the right amount. Maybe I didn't apply the right amount. So let's put more. And once you start doing this process, because actually it was reinforcing the previous 3, 4, 5 years, he got a linear, more or less linear return. And when he didn't get that anymore, he maybe could think that he was doing it wrong, the wrong way. And he started pushing more And once you start pushing more, you get even, you know, a diminishing return. After a while, he will realize that he is polluting his soil, of course. But that is following a bad experience rather than realizing beforehand with an idea of what was going on. So, yeah, well, this is what Peter Senge is telling us, but I'm going through this one now. Now, in decision-making, the rationality of individuals is always limited by information they have, and this was the case of the farmer. So now let's assume you want to go fishing. Do you have good fish in Nigeria? I haven't been able to taste it so far, but good one? Okay, excellent. So, yes. And so if you go fishing, you are a fisherman now, you go fishing, and basically what you want to do but there are also other fishermen around you, and they all have the same mindset. They want to fish as now, unfortunately, as it was, I mean, contrary to what it was considered several years ago, we now know that fish is limited. It's not an unlimited resource. And so this make us fall into the typical dilemma, which is referred, probably you might have heard about it, the tragedy of the commons. Whereas several people are, you know, insisting on the same resorts, and, you know, the game, whether there is or not a negotiation, might lead to the depletion of that resource. So what we incur in is that we are inhibited by the information we have and the way we use that information according to our assumptions. And basically our assumptions are our mental models. What are mental models? Mental models are all those images, again, assumptions, ideas, stories which we carry in our minds about ourselves, about the people surrounding us, about the world, every aspect. And most of the times, this is based only on some explicit knowledge that we can see, but there is a lot of other information that it's hidden, and we need to find out, as Dr. Shola was also mentioning. The importance of data can, you know, allow us to increase our understanding. Now, I would like to move on with an exercise. I don't know how many of you know about it. I'm sorry, by cutting and pasting the slides, I was doing some mess here, but anyway. This is a cognitive self-monitoring test that was developed by Frederick in 2003, and is related to the aspect of bounded rationality. So now, consider being a farmer. You want to go because you want to rest, you want to go playing baseball, and you go to a shop and you buy a mace and a ball, a bat and a ball. And basically, okay, I'm sorry, this is in euros, but consider it's in whatever, dollars or naira, okay? I don't know if you pay 1.10 naira for a bat and a ball, but it's okay. Anyway, you pay at the cash before going out of the shop that amount. Now, you know that you have to respond quickly. So please, even if you just respond out of the answer. You know that the bat costs €1 balls. Ball cost. The bat costs €1 more than the ball. So how much the ball? 1 and 9. How much the ball? 10. How much the ball? How much the ball? You're thinking too much. How much the ball? How much the ball? 9. 1.1. Anyone says more or less? You're thinking too much. Engineers. Okay, well, anyway, I can tell you that 50%, most of the people around anyway, 50%, what they tend to do is to reply that the ball intuitively, the intuitive answer costs 10 cents, okay? But why do they say 10? Well, first of all, the right answer is not 10 cents because if the bat costs €1 more than the ball, then the bat would cost, if the ball costs 10, the bat would cost €1.10. And the sum would be €1.20, right? So if we tested our hypothesis with time, we would have come to the solution. But out of a quick response, 50% of the people reply 10, where the correct answer is, of course, 5 cents. But now the most important thing to understand why you replied 10 or why you didn't give me 5 as the answer. Can anyone try to say why this happened? Exactly that. So what we do under pressure in every decision-making activity, we rely on what we know best, on what we do best, in what we have always done the best, and what we have been taught to use since we were in the first grades of school. And so we subtracted, right? We subtract, we use the subtraction operator. And again, this is relying on, you know, somehow a certain linear approach to thinking. Now, these are all the things that are around and beyond the, and we will see more. Now I want to use some other aspects of what systems are and how they work. So your watch is a mechanical system. A train is an electromechanical system. This classroom is a system of a social system of people. Other classrooms are. Ping pong is a system. So why ping pong is a system? Ping pong is a system. Have you ever played ping pong? Do you like ping pong? Do you have it? Okay. So ping pong is a system because it has identifiable individual parts. All systems have individual parts that can be clearly identified at one point. So players, ball, rackets, and court. These parts affect each other in a dynamical way. But let's stay first to the fact that there is an interaction among these parts, which is constituted, first of all, by the rules of the game between the players, and then by the laws of physics. When I hit the ball, I am subject to the rule of physics, and the ball is subject to the rule of physics. And they are dynamic because together this part create a unique effect, which is more or less always different and can be replicated several times. Now, systems are characterized this way, but are also characterized by the difficulty to perceive what is really happening inside the system. And we have seen an example also with the farmer, the fisherman, etc. So what you see is not always what you get. And why this? This is happening because there are several aspects that contribute to this difficulty of perception of the dynamics of systems. First of all, there is counterintuitive behaviors that comes from the fact that we misperceive the presence of delays. These delays can be intrinsic delays in a system, which electronic has made very short somehow in most systems, at least in the electronic or in the IT, let's say, systems. But still in hardwired systems, there are still intrinsic delays. But there are also perception delays from the human mind. And in this case, the guy just doesn't perceive what could happen and tries to find a solution that will lead him to a good outcome for the moment being because he just wants to sit, he's tired, but can lead to a worse outcome later on. There is also the difficulty to perceive feedbacks. And feedback, probably feedback because you are from an engineering acts by, well, let's say the most feedback which is reinforced acts by. Now, consider you have been working as a farmer, Now you're I also have this pond where if the pond of lilies gets covered, the Chinese fish are going to die, and I paid them a lot of money. So your role is to take care of everything, but especially not allow the pond of lily to cover the lilies to cover the whole pond. So you go to work, 1 lily. You go to work the next week, 2 lilies. You go to work the next week again, 4 lilies. But you see, the pond is still large. You don't really care. When you go to work and you find that the pond is covered for 1/4, 25%, then you start, perceiving that, well, how the hell these lilies are growing quickly? I will have to do something, but I will think about it. Now I have to do other things. You go back the next week, and the pond of lilies is half the pond. So the lilies are covering half of the pond. And you say, what the hell? I didn't bring my tools with me because I didn't think this was so urgent. Okay, I will solve it the next time because it will be 3/4, so I have still time. Linear thinking. You go back the next week and the pond is completely covered by lilies and the fishes are gone, and you're also, and also your job. So now the capacity and the capability, sorry, to perceive feedbacks is very important, because in the first part of exponential feedback, you would misperceive it as linear, but when the curve starts increasing, then it goes boom in a while, and you cannot control anymore. So if you're able to understand that there was an exponential growth once you saw 1, 2, 4, 8, then this would have saved your job, probably. Now, to relax yourself, you decide that I'm working so many jobs. you want to relax a little bit, and you go kayaking or canoeing on a river. But unfortunately, you were a little bit tired by all of these jobs, and you take the wrong direction, and you fall down this waterfall. Real unlucky. You find yourself more or less here, where below the, how you call this one in English? The rainbow, yes, of course, I should have known, remembered. And you have to see yourself. You cannot go behind the waterfall because there is just plain rock. So what do you do? So yes, you just have to save yourself. Yeah, you swim, exactly. You swim away. That's obvious, of course. And what happens is that anyone has any other idea? If you can't swim, you're dead anyway, but yeah. So the idea is that most of the times, and also here, 50% of the people tell me swim, but some others tell me I dive down. I dive deep. Why? So if you swim on the surface, going away, you see the waterfall is creating this current going backwards to exactly to the point where the water hits the lake underneath. And so basically you swim away, but in that particular place, the current against which you swim is very strong. And the more you swim, the more you get tired. And the more you get tired, the more you panic. And when you panic, what do? You just implement the easiest solution you ever can. Swim more, more faster, faster. And the faster you swim, the faster you get tired. And the faster you get tired, the faster you panic. Okay, you know the story now. The problem, the idea, and actually the solution is that if you dive down, the same current that on the surface is going like this is going like this underneath the surface. And if you go down with the same amount or even less energy, you just can push yourself away and come up in a place where basically the surface current is less intense, and then you can save yourself.
Have you fallen down?
I think 20 or 50 times. That's no experience, no? The first 2 or 3 times I died, but then no, so just to say that the fact that there is counterintuitive behavior on where to apply the right policy and the right decision is one of the reasons why systems resist to policy application. And I will show you some examples of this application, especially in something we did in Italy, where we explicitly modeled one of the policies, which was one of the laws promulgated by our government that was aiming to reach a certain objective, but given to the fact that they didn't, let's say, test in a systemic environment, we found out that the outcomes would never be reached. And indeed, they never reached them. Oops, I don't see my presentation anymore. I probably need to just do like that. Oops, sorry. Counterintuitive behavior. I don't know if I touched something inadvertently. Okay, thank you very much. So, just to, let's say, try to conclude some ideas around systems thinking and why it is useful. So where the traditional analysis focuses on always on the individual pieces of what is being studied, systems thinking focuses on how the things interact with each other. It's like seeing not only the single trees, but the whole forest. We know that the forest has an emergent behavior rather than the behavior of a single tree. As if you consider 2 molecules of a hydrogen come together with, sorry, 1 atom of oxygen with 2 atoms of hydrogen, they create a molecule of water, which is something completely different from the gases like hydrogen and oxygen, right? And so what is thinking? This is also one of the points that we need to carry in our mind. Thinking consists mainly of 2 activities: constructing mental models, which are your hypotheses of how to solve a certain problem, especially in decision making, and then simulating them mentally. So, if I do this, I think, yes, it will happen this, this, and that, and I will get this outcome. So you simulate them mentally in order to draw conclusions and make decisions. So why don't we apply this process in a more formal environment into account and influence from us? So let's get to a point where that explains also something else. Like this is an endogeneity principle, which is a requisite systems principle. This is a poster that was originally on the Earth Day poster in 1970. So that's 54 years ago, right? And basically what happened, they were talking about one problem that we haven't solved yet, garbage. 54 years ago, a huge amount of garbage. And what they said, yes, we have a problem, and the problem is that we created the problem. So the conceptualization of the fact that it's the systems inside that creates the problem, and the problem is not caused by somebody outside. This is another important principle. So there is not an exogenous impact on some of our problems, but there is almost always an endogenous perspective to be considered. And by the way, this was also in the ancient ages, like, I don't know if you know the story of Julius Caesar. He was killed by Brutus and Cassius. And actually in a famous work by William Shakespeare, Cassius was telling, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. The stars anciently were meant to be the destiny of people. So it is not the destiny that is forcing our hand to stab Caesars a certain number of times, but it's us who are deciding it. So again, it's the system's structure that determines their behavior. And this is the main concept around systems thinking and system dynamics. Now let's have an example which is taken. I'm sorry, I'm just giving out very simple examples because I think it's very useful for everyone to understand what's behind system thinking. And then we move to system dynamics as a normal, let's say, flow of ideas. Now, let's consider two people living together. One is Sam and another one is Pam. If we take, well, we could take, I'm sorry, this is basically a bit too male-oriented, and I'm sorry to the ladies. I will redraw this example on a first female perspective. So for you know, equality reasons. So anyway, what Pam thinks is that Sam is always mean to her. It's all his fault. If he will be nicer, Pam's life would be better. So we can translate this into what we that introduces three concepts: the cause on the left-hand side, the effect on the right-hand side, and a causal link, so a direction of causality, okay? These are the three main concepts into this. It's basically part of what could be considered also an oriented D-graph for those who like graph theory. But, you know, if we step into the endogenous perspective, maybe there is also something that Pam is doing. And when Pam's feelings are hurt, she starts getting mean towards Sam. And when she gets mean towards Sam, Sam's feelings get hurt. And when Sam's feelings get hurt, his behavior is becoming meaner. And when his behavior is becoming meaner, Pam's feelings are being hurt more. And when their feelings are hurt more, her behavior becomes meaner as well, and so on and so forth. Reinforcing feedback loop, which is made, in this case, I didn't tell you, by positive or direct causal relationship. This one is a direct relationship. If the behavior of Sam grows, the feelings of Pam get hurt more. Sometimes we also call it positive or opposed to the negative causal relationship where the direction is inverse, opposite, let's say. So this is the main principle that we will be using in drawing our system, causal relationship. Now there is also another point, and I get to the point of data that was mentioned by Dr. Shola, is that systems also fool us by presenting themselves as single events. You get the idea of an event happening because something goes above a threshold where your perception and awareness gets stimulated. And if you look at the fact that there is a longer term perspective, like events accumulate into dynamic patterns of behavior, you get that this is happening following a certain behavior over time of a variable of interest. And when this happens, you can say, look at how this variable behaved over time. And if you get the idea of behavior over time, sometimes you get the possibility to, sorry, this is something I shouldn't, it's already something I told you about. Okay. You come to the idea that there are archetypical structures that produce the same type of behavior over time. So the idea that you can understand what is the behavior over time of a system, given the principle that the structure influences the behavior over time, would lead you to consider that there are structures that always produce the same, qualitatively speaking, behavior over time. And that's very important because if you see that behavior in one of the variables of your interest, you know that there is that structure acting underneath. And this is the power of systems thinking and system dynamics, especially when you analyze systems behavior. And when you analyze the data that you want to look into. I'm sorry, this is into Italian, but was just to tell you that there are feedback loops that can be positive, but also negative. This is the, let's say, conceptualization of feedback loops. Let's have a quick look at the negative feedback loop. So you want to fill up, you know, the simplest examples are always the best to understand what's going on here. And let's consider you want to fill a glass of water. So you want to bring the level of water from here to here. And basically what you're perceiving is the difference between the current level of the water into the glass and the desired level, water level. So you calculate mentally a gap and you open the tap, the water starts flowing, but when the water starts flowing, the water level starts increasing and the gap starts reducing. So conceptually speaking, this gap reduces and you are going to slowly reduce, well, you do it quickly, of course, but if you decompress the time of this, basically you would see your hand slowly reducing until you switch off the water flow. By when, of course, the water level in the glass, the actual water level, has achieved the desired water level. Okay? So this is also an example of negative feedback loop. I've lost my mouse, but it should be somewhere here. Okay, it's here. So you get to very complicated causal loop diagrams. This is the qualitative part, but still very useful because when you get to very complicated causal loop diagrams, you can describe the structure, the causal loop structure of a system that then creates most of the times the behavior that you witnessed in the data. And as I said, there are archetypes that can help on this. There are many archetypes. I won't go through them because it would require too much time, but you get a lot of references here, and there are excellent videos and papers that can support you in understanding how archetypes work. I'm sorry, I took the wrong slide here. These are the habits of a systems thinker that summarize more or less what we have talked about. But anyway, I'm going through them. I will substitute this slide with the English version. I'm sorry, but just to tell you that a systems thinker tries to understand the overall framework around himself. He observes how the elements in a system change over time by generating schemes, recurring schemes, and tendencies. He recognizes the impact of time delays when he analyzes cause and effect relationships. He considers how mental model can influence the actual reality, but also the future reality. He considered the consequences, even unintentional consequences, of his own actions, both in the short and in the long term. He recognizes that it's the structure of the system to generate its behavior. He uses the understanding of the structure of the system to identify high leverage actions that he can implement. He considers a problem in a whole before quickly acting in order to find a quick solution. He verifies the results and modifies his action if needed by going through approximate implementations. He tries to surface his hypotheses in order to test them. He pays attention to the stock and to the way those stock change over time. And I'm going through the stock concept, which is the last concept you need to understand that creates the dynamic of a system and creates meaningful connections among various systems and within those subsystems. Now let's move to the, I don't know if, stop me when we have to take a break or whatever. Okay, so let's have a look at the concept of the stock. Basically, I'm sure you have seen in your life a bathtub, right? Everyone has seen it at least once. Now we have showers, but you know, bathtubs were pretty much used some times ago and still are. So basically, in order to fill the bathtub, you open the tap, the water starts flowing. At one point, you take your bath and then you want to, you know, remove the water. So you open the drain and basically the water flows out. Now, the question is, when eventually is the stock of the water decreasing, remaining stable, or even increasing if we consider that we could have both flows, so the inflow of water and the outflow from the drain open or acting at the same time, according to you? Please, no system dynamicist response here, because you know. So when is the water in the bathtub growing, according to you, if we have both flows open? Exactly, if the inflow is bigger than the outflow. And when it is decreasing? Exactly. But this is very important because my presentation has disappeared again. So I don't know if the... Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't do anything. It just went away. So I'll try to go forward. Yes, it works. Maybe let me go like this and yes. Okay, we're back. But disappears by... Is this a touch screen?
Yeah, I think so.
Ah, that's why. Now I realize this misbehavior of the system. Okay, so I'll stand a little bit back. Now, there is an integration concept here, guys. So the level of the water in the bathtub is equal to the integral of the difference of the two flows plus the amount of water in the stock at time 0. And when you have an integration, you have dynamics. I heard Jay Forrester say that integration is the only physical behavior that exists in nature. And indeed, it's true. I mean, you don't have the derivation effect. Derivation is a mathematical construct, but integration is physical and it's real. Just think of a bathtub, right? So what creates the dynamics in a system is the presence of accumulation points, of stocks. And I'm trying to move forward again. Maybe like this. Maybe like this. Yes. Well, this is the example that is basically taken exactly from the same example I did before, so I'm not going to go through it. Now, I would like you to, I'm not doing this as the exercise I normally do, but I think it's just approach. So consider that we have this example of accumulation, right? A bathtub. So probably a lot of people also online might know this one. Anyway, let's consider that we have a bath with an inflow, which is the solid line. You see it? It is equal to 75 liters per minute in the first 4 minutes. Then it goes down to 25 liters per minute from minute 4 to minute 8. Then it goes back up to 75 from minute 8 to minute 12. And it goes back down from minute 12 to minute 16. This is the inflow over time. The outflow is fixed and it's 50 liters per minute constantly. Okay, it's a constant value of 50 per minute. Now, I'm gonna leave you a few seconds just to project mentally what could be the oops, I don't have to get too close. What would be the behavior over time of the level of the water in the bathtub, because these are only the flows, the one going in and the one going out. Now, how the bathtub is behaving according to you? I usually let my students have 5-10 minutes to do it, but you know, maybe you can solve it quicker, especially if we rely on the last thing I told you a few minutes ago. Any idea? Yes. Exactly.
So that accumulation
Will be a decumulation. And so on. Exactly. just like that. So it goes up, but the interesting thing is that it goes up linearly. Okay, because it gets that there is a difference of 25 liters per minute at each minute. So each minute you gain 25, 25, 25, 25, 25 until you get the 200. I didn't mention that the starting value at time zero was 100 liters already in the bathtub. Sorry, my bad. This is taken from a famous paper from John Sterman called Bathtub Dynamics. You can find it on the internet. But what happens if I change the flow, one of the flows? Now, your cash balance is basically an accumulation. Well, in most of the cases, it's always an accumulation. But let's say that you have some income and you have, some expenses. So the cash balance really depends on how much money go in and also how much money go out, the amount of money you have. Now, let's consider that the outflow, so the expenses, are constant at $50 per week. What changes here is the income that goes down from 100 to 0 over the course of the first 4 weeks, then goes back up from 4 to 8. Hello? Yes? Any question from? Any question online? No. Okay, let's move forward. So, and so on. So from 4 to 8, it goes up to 100, and then it goes back down again to 0 and up again to 100. So according to you, how would the behavior of your cash balance be over time? A little bit more difficult, right? So it was easier to understand. But when you change the perspective, what happens? Okay, I don't want to lose too much time on this, but again, integration, guys. And indeed, there is a linear behavior that applies here. And because of that, the integration becomes quadratic. And so you have an increase which slows down because actually your income slows down. And from minute 2, you start even losing money because in the first part, like from minute 0 to minute 2, you were still gaining, but with a diminishing approach. When you get up to 2, then you start losing money, and the money in your balance start going down, and they continue going down from minute 4. What the hell? From minute 4 to minute 6, right? They continue to go down, but you lose a little bit less money, and so on and so forth. Okay, this one you can reply. So consider you have a mall and you have people getting inside the mall, and you also have people getting outside the mall. So there is a number of people entering, which is the line which is not dotted. Well, the quality of the image is not so good, but you can see that there is an entering behavior that goes down, and then there is a dotted line. Okay, can you see the dotted line? Yes. Okay, now there are 4 questions that I want to ask. At which minute were the most people going in the department store or the mall? At which minute were the most people going out? Let's reply first to these 2 questions. At which minute were the most people going in, and at which minute were the most people going out? 4 going in. 4 minutes going in and going out? 21, 20, okay. Yes, okay, we all concur on that. Now, at which minute the graph shows the maximum number of people inside the department store, and at which minute the graph shows the minimum amount of people inside the department store?
Twenty-two, 21.
21, the maximum? Uh-huh. Anyone offers more or less? 22, the least, and the most? 13. Okay, I'm gonna solve the, but again, the understanding of stocks and flows here. So again, if we have to say the most, what is the most? Okay, max entry, then is the most. Okay, several opinions, okay? Now, 4 was the minute at which most of the people was going in, 21, the most people going out, 13 and 30, I'm sorry, this is, let's see why. It spoiled the answers. 4, 21, 13, 30. Let's see why. Oops. The maximum is where the inflow meets the outflow. And up to that point, there has been more people going in than people going out. More water going into the bathtub than water that was flowing out. It was exactly the same thing, but you just didn't visualize the stock because it was an intrinsic visualization. And of course, the least amount inside the department store is at the end of the simulation, let's say at the end of the period at minute 30, because the outflow has been higher than the inflow for a longer period of time. Now, that's the point. When we look at the data, if we don't consider what we're looking at, we might risk of, you know, getting huge biases. Okay. Okay, let me go quickly forward. Well, now let's get to some examples because I've been boring you a lot on theory, but I think it was interesting to try to get some relevant basics around it, right? So with the stock and flow representation, so this is a stock and the big arrow is a flow, and the blue arrows are information links bringing information around the system, okay? You can, if you are in IT, you can also consider them as pointers to information. You can also start developing very interesting models. This is a very famous model that represents the behavior of an infection. You can consider COVID as an example, but every infection could be modeled more or less like this. You have an initial susceptible population that is subject to an infection rate that determines how much we open the tap that flows susceptible people out of their stock into the infectious people. And this rate is determined by an infectivity parameter, by the number of the total population, and by a contact rate. And so there is some depletion loop that depletes susceptible people according to the fact that there is a contagion loop that brings people up. There is an archetype here, which is called the limits to growth. And basically you get an initial ramp up because the contagion loop is very strong and builds the contagion up. But then after a while, there are no more people to infect. And so the slope slows down and plateaus, basically. This is what is happening. This is the behavior of that more or less model, okay? Now, there are lots of models that we could go through. I don't think we have the time because unfortunately I was taking a little bit too much time in that. But I would suggest that there are a lot of models in silico that we developed also based on a book that was written by Donella Meadows. Donella Meadows was one of the 4 Jay Forrester's PhD students who developed the model together with Jay, which was called World 3, that 54 years ago determined how we could have kind of managed better how we are overusing the resources in our world if we had acted more promptly and let's say with a little bit of forward-looking approach. Now, the point is that we didn't do it, and unfortunately, we are where we are, but still with some options available for us. Now, in that book, you would find a lot of models that would explain typical behaviors of typical system, like one-stock systems, where you have two balancing loops that determine, for example, the room temperature. Or you could have a stock that determines the behavior of a population, which is subject to a mortality rate, but also fertility rate. And so you get basically an increase in the water in the bathtub, which is the population, if the reinforcing loop is higher than the balancing loop of deaths. And so on and so forth. I want to show you, oops, this is annoying. I want to show you some examples because I think we are running out of time. Because we are here to talk about what this methodology could be helpful for if we talk about policy analysis, impact evaluation, and stuff like that. So let me go to, yeah. This is the typical situation with policies. So you need basically to have several aspects that come into place, like you can have models that you can compose in order to create some cross, let's say, value among the various systems. But you also need to have collaborative modeling about various expertises that you have to put in place if you want to reach an understanding of various factors of different systems coming together. Easy access to information and knowledge creation. Then you need, because you need data basically to populate your models. Then you need to validate your model. So basically a model is validated if the behavior over time of the model is able to reproduce the behavior over time of the data that you have introduced here. You can also create some interactive simulation to pose that model to the test of the experts, to the policy experts. And then you do some output analysis and knowledge synthesis in order to see if that policy has the potential to become an effective policy. Let's have a look at how this works. This was a model that we developed in collaboration with the Center for Economic and Energy Studies at NE in order to, well, this was back in 2010, so it's an old model. Now, of course, the situation, at least in Europe, has changed a little bit because we are going towards electrical mobility. But the model here was representing the private road transport sector in the EU, so to simulate and forecast alternative scenarios, allowing energy and oil companies to maintain or increase their own competitive advantage on the market, and on another side, to support the development of public, national, and international energy and transportation policy. This was an attempt to develop a tool that was aimed to forecast transportation scenarios. Now here you see only the causal loop diagram because it would take too much time to go through the stock and flow diagram. But basically it is helpful to understand also what could be the related consequences in terms of CO2 emissions. And we analyzed several markets, like, for example, Eastern Europe countries, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, that were characterized by a greater increase of private transportation demand and a lower increase, for example, in diesel consumption due to the phase they were finding themselves at. So this was useful to understand a few things around transportation policies. Then we developed a simulator that we also presented at the System Dynamics Conference a few years ago, where we were trying to understand how to make a city sustainable by looking at various aspects that are strictly connected, like public buildings, public housing, transport, water management, waste, and environment. And these were the areas that we were looking at in order to determine the sustainability of a city. And these were the leverages that were identified that were acting in order to determine what is the attractiveness of a city, the GDP per capita, the traffic congestion, the pollution, the water shortage, the number of households, all connected, also following the studies of Jay Forrester on urban dynamics and other important studies in the field that followed. This was another work we did in the public transportation area, where we wanted to investigate the effect of marketing techniques on, let's say, bringing the behavior of people that has to use public transport to abandon their own private transportation. So to support, let's say, the diffusion of the sustainable urban mobility plans that are happening at the moment in Europe. So we developed this model that was basically trying to understand what can change the idea of people to use public transport versus their own private transport, which is basically, let's say, a function of utility for them. But to get to the point where they decided to change, they really have to perceive the value of changing. And so the marketing techniques that we identified were those that were able to produce this type of effect, just to, let's say, compress, to make a long story short. We also analyzed policies to prevent or to contrast water shortages in big cities. And we applied this in the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. So to understand what could be the effects of policies, this is a very simplified system. You have there, let's say, the overall conceptual system around water, let's say, management. We worked together with the UN FAO, which is in Rome, by the way, in order to understand what would be a systemic perspective behind food supply and distribution system. This was one of the main, let's say, concepts also beyond my research studies, which tend to take linear frameworks and make them systemic. And I applied this also to cybersecurity recently. You will show a study around this. So basically, FAO had a linear framework determining the effectiveness of food supply and distribution system. We said, no, you have to consider how these points in the framework are connected together. And we developed this model that was taken up by FAO. Then we went forward, and building on that framework, we also tried to apply this to a specific case study of, in the dairy sector in Bogota, where we also evidenced the SDGs that were touched in this type of exercise. Let's see a couple of applications in the area of defense and security. This is a model that we have developed related to the assessment of cyber risks for small middle enterprises. The first study we did was to take the linear framework, again, which is a tree-shaped framework, like a tree graph, okay? And basically, we took the leaves of that graph and we said, okay, these leaves are touching points of that organization, of the small middle enterprise. It could be also big enterprise, of course. But we started detecting what were the systemic linkages among those parts. And we reconstructed that into a model that is currently being used in order to assess the risks of small middle enterprises in Italy. But since we sometimes get bored all of this, we also create board games because they're very useful in driving some concepts to people, especially when they are entertained. And we developed a model that's based on cyber risk management into banks. So there is an underneath system dynamics model that drives the rules of the game, that basically sees the security engineers, the CEO, the CERT management, and the DevOps management acting together in order to prevent attacks of an attacker, sorry, trying to obtain some results from the attack. We also applied it to analyze counterterrorism policies with the Italian Ministry of Defense. And yeah, this was later also developed into another work where we tried to understand the dynamics of the ISIS in the Middle East. Which is basically this one, in order to try to understand how to reduce policies for reducing terrorism casualties from attacks in cities. We also applied this to border control management with a European project that basically was trying to understand how the policies for managing border control were or were not effective, depending on the types of investments that were carried out by the, let's say, a European system for preventing, illegal immigration or even goods smuggling, illegal goods smuggling. We also applied this to an international crisis analysis, and in particular, the crisis that took place in Mali or around 10 years ago. And basically, we took that model and we validated it through history by also analyzing how the very same model could be applied to understand the campaigns of Julius Caesar in France 2000 years before. And actually, we had exactly the same structure. Applications in the area of governance. This is the example that I was talking about when we tried to model the military workforce dynamics, because there was a law which was passed by the Italian government that was meant to reach certain targets. It's a little bit covered by the picture now, the PIP. But actually, we understood that it was not going to be possible to reach that targets, because basically they didn't take into account the dynamics, that go that happen indeed in the system. Oops. Then we went through also some. It's okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. It's just that I have to sometimes get close, and it's pretty sensitive. We also applied it to understand what are the best policies to stimulate what we call the digitization, paper digitization process in a world that is getting more and more digitalized. Basically, the public administration in Italy was trying to, let's say, get rid of paper. You're doing the same thing. Yes. And so we modeled this in order to understand what are the best policies to go to achieve best results. We also, okay. We also tried to model how the judicial system is working, because in Italy we have a huge backlog of cases, and basically we were trying to understand what was causing this backlog of cases. So we basically went on to analyze, well, as soon as I move it, it goes down. I don't know if, so maybe I should not move. Yeah, I'm sorry. So it's not me, it's just, it's okay. Okay, well, I can go through anyway and skip it like this. No problem. Oh, no, it's okay. I will just go with the arrows down. And basically what you see is that here, also here, we have developed a model where we have tried to understand why the cases are, so delayed in their resolution. And basically because we understood that there was a diarchy between the Ministry of of Law and what we call higher court, and basically the decisions that they were taking were not synchronized the innovation was seen differently by the two systems, and the judges were not relying on the help of those two contrasting systems, and ultimately were taking decisions alone at local level. And so this creates this huge backlog. Whereas by understanding this and putting people together with a single office managing innovation and support, this could lead to a better outcome in speeding up the resolution of cases. Yes, this is still part of the same story and of the same model, just to represent different parts of the system. We also worked on a project, which was one of our most successful one, related to anti-racism policies in football. There is a huge problem in Europe, as you might know now, and we worked together with the European Commission by means of an Erasmus Plus Sports in order to understand what are the dynamics, especially the cultural dynamics that determine this. And we got a model which describes in an interesting way this aspect. We also developed, let's say, a comparison by understanding what are the policies that we implemented with COVID and the dynamics and how we promptly reacted compared to how we should react in a similar way when we deal with climate change. So we reacted more or less promptly, but there are some lessons learned from the COVID era, let's say, because we didn't really react promptly. And the delay we used in reacting was sufficient to bring us and to lock us all in. So now the problem is that with longer dynamics, the perception of those dynamics is even worse from people and also from decision makers. And that's why we need to rely on systems thinking in order to, anticipate as much as possible these situations. This was an interesting other board game that we've developed in order to train about project management. And we developed a board game where basically you are a wedding planner and you have to organize some wedding, but it is based on system dynamics mechanics. The rules are based on system dynamics mechanics. So you get accumulation, delays, perception delays, counterintuitive behavior, and lots of stuff like those I have told you about. Now, let's conclude quickly with the smart model-based governance, which summarizes a little bit of these things. Now, Gartner Analytics Maturity Model told us that there are several types of data analytics. Now, this has been partially substituted by AI, but there is a risk, of course, in AI, which is connected also to a lot of opportunities. So we have to know how we manage AI in a proper way. But after all, AI basically relies on analytics or on data analytics. And so the problem with AI now is that its predictive approach is not yet perfect. And it basically relies, when we talk about data analytics, on something we do when we work with correlations. So if we work at statistical level, and this is what we do, not only with AI, but in general, when we work with statistics, and again, this is not an attack against statistics, but it's just to say that we have to pay attention to what we do, because of course, correlation is different, much different than causation. And with correlation, you could get, even very naive connections that you can see, for example, here. And, predicting behavior from analytics, if you rely on past events, it would probably lead you to consider, one of these three dotted behavior here. But what if the real behavior is then, boom, going down like this? Well, you could be able, by relying on even very sophisticated software, to, let's say, understand that the curve is, slowly curving, but only in the immediate proximity of the data that you get and that you use. Whereas if you have a system-oriented approach, by knowing you remember I told you about the systems archetypes. By knowing what is the systems structure, you would be able to unite this with analytics and then try to project a much better outcome, because you are also relying on the structure of the system that can provide long-term view and perspective. This is just, of course, a synthesis of what I just told you. So what I call the smart model-based governance framework is that, for example, by using process mining, I don't know if you're familiar with process mining, which is a way to infer processes based on the information that comes from systems logs, for example. So you get the data coming out of the systems, the data that the systems, the IT systems produce, and you can reconstruct a model. But the point is that part of those processes are not always held only in the IT systems. Part of those processes are also held out and are based on personal relationships or on the perception we have. Some people take out the data from system, process it out of the system, and then reintroduce it back in the system. And you cannot control what has been happening outside of the process. So the idea is that by analyzing the organization data, by means also of the perspective of those who have designed the organization, you can get to a similar model, and then you try to match those two models in order to understand where are the differences and where you have part of the process that is not mapped through the logs and where you don't have the right data because you're getting the organizational data in the right way. So in the end, this is the smart model-based governance, which summarizes a little bit this concept. I think basically done. There will be many, many other things to talk about, but I think that I've taken up all of my time. And so I just thank you, of course, for any additional question. I am absolutely available to try to solve them. Thank you.
You must agree with me that now we have a better understanding of everything. Governance or the administration or agriculture or basically we have seen it. And during the course of the head of mathematics came, erudite personality in the area of mathematics, a very good mathematician for that matter, trained by one of the best that Africa has ever produced. And we also have some people from the systems engineering here. That we have solutions in the area of system dynamics. And I'm happy also that someone from the legislature is also here. So you can see how everything integrates and the nature of the job we do in NACETEM. The nature of research that we do is to look at what exists, present it to government, that decision making is better made. And it applies more particularly to the legislature, where the decisions we make have long-term impact on the entire system. Without this kind of way of connecting everything together, you will now notice how weak, approaches have been. First, you need to have somebody like a prompt engineer of sorts who will understand the existing system, analyze it, distill what it is, and try to make projections of what could happen when certain decisions are made. And this kind of characterizes our work in NACETEM, separate from most of the other research institutes. We basically look at what the entire system does.
Can I add something? Can I add something? But just, I don't want to interrupt you, but the important is that, as you say, you have systems engineers, mathematicians, physicians, etc. But one of the most important things is that we forget when we implement policies is that we have to talk to the people who are then those who are following the rules. And if we don't get their perspectives, we are not able to factor that in. And so it's like when you introduce a new technology. If the people don't know how to use it or don't want to use it and are not, let's say, willing, because they are not, I don't get the word in English. English is bad, so.
Anything.
Yeah, they just, you know, push that technology away. They're not interested, or yeah, exactly. And this is something that it's also important. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No,
Just
it's
want
also
to add this.
important that to come because this is supposed to be interactive and for us all to ruminate around how do we improve our outcomes. Clearly, we all agree that the way things are running in Nigeria today, compared to the rest of the world, is not the best. And there should be a group of people thinking of how to get out of this problem. And those kind of people, by our mandate, is us. We are not designed to do the common laboratory research. So you don't see NACETEM build buildings, build structures, buy equipment and stuff. In fact, there was a time, and I've told this story a couple of times, so for those who don't be bored. In my church, the pastor said, come with your working tool. The most important tool of your business, bring it. So some people brought hammers, some people brought saws, some doctors brought stethoscopes and co. So I just got there. I didn't hold anything. So somebody tapped me and said, where is your own tool? I pointed at my head, my brain. That's what I use. And that's what NACETEM is for Nigeria. NACETEM thinks for the country and provides information. There are some funds you mentioned, EU, Erasmus, Horizon, and Co. And I see you've been doing many projects with them. And these projects are projects we need to do to understand our whole menu. But we have to maybe working with you, shadowing those ones that have been successful.
Pleasure. So
that we replicate them here and get them going. So perfect AUST president is here. We will connect together and nucleate those activities here in a joint collaborative effort with you. I don't want to waste time telling stories about, right? These people here are already scribbling, and we are going to put together a series of proposals in the area of governance, in the area of security, in the area of agriculture, health, housing, and all the things that are our basic problems, so that we begin to have projections that, you know, are representative of success models, and then we build them together. That is when we get the essence of NACETEM, and that's where we now begin to move to the next phase. It's good to formulate the ideas, analyze the policies. Then the most important thing is acculturation. For us to go and persuade the leaders that we have done this analysis, this is the results, these are the likely projections of what will happen, and these are the tools we have been using. The next moment is, how do we convince them that what we are saying is the right path to follow? How do we convince them to support us so that we can do more studies that will prove the hypotheses and all the theories we come up with, in such a way that we can guide them by examples of micro success models that we can now project to larger opportunities. That is the essence of our organization. It's not for us to pretend as if the data we are collecting is the most important thing, but to see how those data impact life and corrective action that could be made by the leaders. And it is with this I thank Professor Stefano. He has given us more than 120 contact hours of lecture in a compressed fashion. This one semester, I could see. Because if he was going to take you through the rudiments, by the time he started the differential equations, he will have taken you to understand first what the differential equations is, examples of that, and how they integrate, and get you to decipher the equation that will fit a particular scenario, giving you just the pros of what has happened. And I can imagine that will precipitate a new program, which is another point I want to make. it may be necessary for us to, and we are in the university, AUST is usually accommodating of new programs of that nature. Perhaps maybe our public policy program will integrate a 120-hour contact lecture on systems thinking and systems engineering, so to speak, so that we can begin to engineer successes for Nigeria. I am a restless person. Every moment I'm talking to one person or the other, trying to sell business of NACETEM. I would rather be doing that than sitting down in one position. And while he was giving his lecture, something just occurred to me. I was in front of the DG of Department of State Services, DSS, recently, and I told him a lot of things that we are doing. And I mentioned the issue of policy coordination. It's a major weakness in our economy. Now I have the tools, hopefully, be able to bring about this policy coordination in such a way that it will make sense. Immediately I left that office, I came out with something. Everybody that wants to sell gadgets to then come to us now in NACETEM, and we'll vet them and sell them. This one makes sense, this one doesn't make sense. Don't waste time with this, go with that. Because I need to market. I need to convince those who are in serious positions of leadership that we have a group of people whose job is just to think. And that's all. We are not the people that get the best funding, but we are supposed to think, and our thinking is supposed to be sold. So who is the best person to sell that rather than the chief marketer of the organization? So I keep going around trying to sell these ideas. And my strength is in all of you coming together to work as teams, looking at different areas. And this has been very enlightening. It has shown us all areas. Is it automotive issues that we want to look at? You know, the entire system. How do we build vehicles and all of that? The vehicles that ply our roads and all of that, using our resources and taking advantage of the huge population of Nigeria, moving them from one point to the other. We're having a conference on transport. These are the issues being discussed. Ownership of pipelines that carry products from one place to the other, and security of those pipelines and so many things, using technology to drive good outcomes. So this organization is a busy organization. We have different people, different teams working on different areas. And Professor Stefano has just helped us to encapsulate those things into simple mathematical models. Simple for those who understand mathematics. I'm sure Madam Gambo here is smiling because when you talk mathematics, she's a graduate of mathematics. We have quite a number of people here who are also mathematicians and who understand calculus. I'll tell you a joke. In Western Nigeria, you start learning mathematics 2+ and it gets more difficult and all. That's mathematics. And this is the beginning of what system dynamics is. By the time you have learned mathematics to the point where the snake comes in, that is maths, a little. You know that snake mathematics is top mathematics. He has just simplified it to us using models to explain integration, how you add things up that are not linear, but in many ways, not even circular, in different loops. I can't summarize in proper terms what we have learned, but I know for sure it's the beginning of new things, beginning of new heights for us. We are not just going to be collecting data now. We are going to be presenting the data in a way that will be persuasive. I learned one thing from one of the people who used to write speeches for the president. You know, I was secretary of the organization, so I just said, we are invited to come to this event. It's going to happen on so dates, time, and everything, venue. He said, no, when you write a letter inviting someone, you have to let the person's head swell. You have to use dramatic language to encourage them. So by the time they read the first, oh, secretary, please put this date. It's very important.
It's marketing.
That's some of the things. You start interacting and you don't stay on your own. The beauty of all of us fingers are pointing at you because you have not contributed your own, and clearly it's evident. Prof,
Thank you.
and open the floor for questions, which I'm sure will be a lot. And for those of you online, I know that you are following with us. In these times, it's possible. Yes, ex-coordinator, we can ask the questions. You raise your hands and then you'll be called to, you'll be acknowledged and then you'll be unmuted so that you can ask your questions. For the rest of us here, just indicate, and we'll be able to take the questions. Prof, you may want to have some water or
Yes.
While
Thank
questions
you.
go.
Yes.
Sorry. One gentleman is pointing his finger, another one.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, I sit down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Stefano. Once again, a round of applause for Prof.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, if you permit me, I would want probably
Yes.
So, we would likely go for photograph, group photograph, just a short break. And in that short break, we'll have a group photograph and we do some level of network. And then we'll come back, you can have the question and answer section.
You have to remove it. Oh, sorry, I never. Yes, sorry.
Put them down. We will take all of them. Okay.
Let's ask those questions now.
Right.
And, it's too much of information for us to allow to go like that. So let's.
Yes, please.
Dr. Apologize. Thank you very much.
No, no.
Yes, any other person speaking?
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Beck. Yeah, I'm Shari. I'm a system dynamics, in the academics precisely, published over 7 articles, system dynamics, basically in the energy sector. A major challenge I've observed across in this field in Nigeria or in this part of the world in terms of West Africa, because South Africa and Kenya seems to be the pioneer for Africa so far. A major challenge I've observed is that capacity building is a bit low. What you presented in just a few minutes should have been maybe in a couple of months. You know, in terms of that, capacity building is very low in this part of the world. That's why most of us seems not to have vast knowledge of this system or this framework. I want to ask, and this goes to Prof and the President and also Dr. Lu Soji, if I'm right. Is there any kind of platform that could be presented to enhance capacity building in this framework? Because it's very dynamic, very broad. I could remember some few years ago, let's say precisely 4 years ago, Nigerian government developed a system dynamic model to create a kind of integrated loop to see how Nigerian could achieve the sustainable development goal across the whole sector. It was a presidential effort, but done in the UK. When I saw the model, I was surprised. But invariably, we've got some experts in Nigeria that are scanty spread across. So what efforts could be put in place to conceptualize these several efforts to bring those knowledgeable, probably the way Prof has been around among us, but this is transit and it's not going to be permanent. So how do we conceptualize efforts in this framework? We've got some expertise in Nigeria, too, especially in OAU, in IFE, you know, like I learned this field from my boss, Professor Momodu in OAU, and some other international collaborative efforts. I noticed after me and some very few that are not in Nigeria now, this model, this framework is dying in the country, which is very good for sustainable policy development. Very perfect, non-linear, is quite complex, and it could be used if well integrated. People from the sciences, from management, from different fields comes together. They're going to present a robust policy framework in the security field, whatever field that would align and solve national issues. I mean, serious national issues. Me, I've applied it in the energy sector, and I've published several articles, gone for several conferences, and it has been fantastic so far. But because of my little knowledge in management, in security issues, I'm like in the bottleneck in that perspective. So this could be the every other person's story. So Prof, sir, let me summarize this in one. What efforts will be put in place to enhance capacity building in this field? Thank you. All right, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Kingsley. I work with Nigerian Atomic Energy Oil, and work with Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. Prof, thank you for this presentation. I look at this as a tool that can solve a problem. And our challenge now is how to use this tool, to solve, our emerging problem here in Nigeria. And I look at two areas. One is the transport system. Let's take Abuja as a whole. If you close by 12 and you drive out from the central area where the secretariat is, you see pool of workers that don't know when to have the next available transport to go home. And if you look at all this, what Prof has said, it's a very, great tool that can solve our transportation problem. If the government can accept, these tools. Secondly, another area I look at it is with the Ministry of Humanitarian. And the president has given the new minister to take over 50 to 100 million Nigerians from poverty. How do you get these people out of poverty if we don't apply these tools. And the FCT minister, is somebody that wants results. If we can simulate this, just Abuja transport system, buses to be provided, when the buses to be deployed, time for the buses to leave, and be able to evaluate the performance of this transport system here, whereby when somebody closes for Federal Secretariat, he knows that after rush hour, 200 buses will be at the Secretariat. When the rush hour is reducing, the volumes will be reducing based on the system feedback that Prof talked about. And if you can package this system very well and solve one problem and say system dynamics, solve this problem, and people are seeing the response for other areas, the patronage will be very high. Prof, how do we implement these tools in real life problem? Taking these two scenarios are taken. The transport system, like in Europe, when you at rush hour in the morning, the trams come every maybe 2 seconds or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. After the rush hour, maybe every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes. And it's not arranged in such a way that the system is receiving some input, is analyzing the input, giving some output, and there are feedback mechanisms to make sure that service are delivered efficiently, effectively, and timely. And this is should be our transition after this program. How we'll be able to organize ourselves and develop a model that can solve the simplest problem, especially transport systems in Abuja. And if we can succeed with that, because I know if you have a good model and we talk to the minister and said, for Abuja to have effective transport system, this is what we need to do. And if this thing is in place, we will be at the control room to monitor and analyze and be able to measure the performance of our system. And if the system performs, I tell you, you can apply it in various areas of life endeavors, and life will be comfortable for us here in Nigeria. So thank you very much.
Round of applause for him. All right. So, yeah,
good afternoon. Please permit me to sit. My name is Mojibo Selid. I'm also from the Atomic Energy Commission. I double as a member of the Energy Society. So, Prof, thank you so very much for this. I don't think other people will know the value of the lecture today as much as we do. For us in AUN, we have this community where I came from, and we've been teaching system dynamics since 2011. In our experience, and particularly in my personal experience, what is missing for African students and Nigerian students is that we miss the fundamentals when it comes to percentages, ratios, basic arithmetic. So even going to the integration level is kind of too complex when you're drawing models. And I'm glad that Doctor has given us the opportunity to house the systems dynamics course here in this university. If they could ask you to design a curriculum for them, can you please make sure there's a pathway for this? Say, for instance, behavior over time graphs are shown in the course from preliminary modules and aspects of economics, aspects of agriculture, aspects of energy. So it's so that it can be an all-comprehensive course. So I think this should be very difficult for you. Also, in the course of your presentation, I'm not too sure if many people will understand the concept of stock and flows, because again, I think it's too complex. You might need to break it down a bit. Yes. Also, we would like to have some of the time members of society to make some proposals to you. Definitely utilize your so it's better some of the time. Yes.
Any more questions right now? Yeah, well, I will start with basically mixing the question that was told about capacity building, but also with the necessity to eventually have an interdisciplinary path towards, policy model, policy movement. So by means also of system dynamics. But the idea here is that system dynamics can be very helpful when you go to the very high level of decision. But of course, it would be, as I also said at one point, useless without proper implementation
of IT systems and also hardwired systems, because of course you cannot manage the problem of public transport if you don't get buses. I saw a model at the System Dynamics conference that they were talking about dairy production of cheese and all this stuff, but in the model there were no cows. So, I scratched my head and said, okay, where the hell the milk is coming from and how much capacity we have for that milk. So in the end, of course, you also need buses, the implementation of important projects like metro, trains, highways, and this requires massive investments that probably, a lot of how to say, companies also in Nigeria would be happy to take on. But these investments need to come, when you have also the IT systems that are able to drive them. But, when you come to this, to the implementation of these systems, you also have to have eventually decided already, just as if you had those things in place. And this is where system dynamics can apply, so that you can have a higher decision-making understanding, and then you can start to say, okay, I need this, this, and that. So better to implement a metro rather than, I don't know, a light rail, or better to have this type of transportation, public transportation means, rather than these others. Or how do we move from, as I was saying, from private to public? How do we encourage people to use public against private, etc.? Because then other issues might arise, like security. Some people might not feel safe if there are no security standards, or, to go around and they might decide, well, maybe I should bring my children to school with a car rather than in an unsafe environment. I'm just saying this could be one issue, for example. So as you see, there are several parts that connect. And when it links to transportation, how do we solve the transportation issue also with the poverty issue? Well, for sure, if you implement a good way to move people around and to move goods around, then this is a very good step forward, incrementing, let's say, the average GDP of people, because you increment the capability of the country, and so you spread somehow the income. Well, there should be also a policy about how to redistribute wealth, access to health services, and so on and so forth. But these things, again, are connected, and you have to consider them. About capacity building, for sure, as I was talking to Dr. Shola, everything starts from the school. In Italy, we are trying to introduce systems thinking at the level of the schooling education. So from the first grades, and possibly to bring it up so that when you educate people from the start, they have the right mindset then when they will enter the world of work. But someone might say, okay, so what do we do now? Because we have a problem now. We cannot wait 10 or 15 years. Well, of course, we need to educate also the current decision makers not really educate, but let them understand through the right ways of marketing the use of system dynamics, which is an issue per se, but because sometimes people say, okay, you're selling me this thing which is not easy to understand. Why don't you give me something easier? And this happens a lot of times. So the world of system dynamics is still working on this, but something we found out is that online simulators, games, how to say, showcases, case studies, etc., can help. Because if you show someone only science, science has determined that showing science to people doesn't work. This is what John Sterman says always. But if you use something that they can experience and they can realize, so testing their mental models that in a, of course, let's say, scientifically based environment, then they would tend to say, okay, Houston, we have a problem, because they have created the model themselves to a certain extent, and then they have tested their hypotheses, and they have seen that their hypotheses don't work in the model that they have created themselves. So, so in capacity building, school is important, but also, the creation of simple things that can help policymakers. And when it comes to, well, of course, this touches also about the interdisciplinary course, where, of course, you have to bring a lot of competencies together because you have to test different mental models around the same topic. I didn't show this image today because I didn't include in my slide deck, but just imagine when you bring different people from different fields of studies or even expertise together, and they're looking at the same problem, right? Like, for example, our company doesn't sell. So the human resource is probably saying that the company doesn't sell because they don't have enough people. The logistics say that they don't sell because they don't have enough capacity to bring the goods to the final destination. And so different people might say their own different perspective about one unique problem: the company doesn't sell. So it's like looking at a cylinder which is projected with a certain light in the space. So if you project light on a cylinder side, you would see on one of the walls a rectangle. But if you project the light on the side of the cylinder from its base, you would see a circle on the other wall. They are both true. Those perspectives are both true, but it's the cylinder which is real. And so the idea of bringing different policymakers that, and we can do this with group model building, which is a great way of bringing mindsets together, then they come to understand the cylinder and not their own perspectives. Boundaries is true. That's a very important issue. Usually boundaries get expanded as soon as you go modeling, but it really depends on the model you're trying to solve. George Richardson, which is another prominent system dynamicist in the US, says that it's always better to keep the models simple and start with very simple models to understand global dynamics. And if you look at the Limits to the Growth book, which I had, unfortunately, in Italian, I'm sorry, but the chance to give to Mr. Sciola, the model was relatively simple to understand the dynamics of the world, guys. The model was relatively simple. I think it was a matter of 30 to 40 stocks. And, it's very impressive on the simplicity, but still the complexity that model was able to catch. Notwithstanding this, sometimes you need to, especially when you go to the micro level, the more micro you go, the more you have to enlarge the boundary in order to understand what you're taking into account. I think I touched almost all of the points, so some other questions. Yes, it might be counterintuitive, but sometimes it really depends. Of course, if you go at the very micro level, there is a point in which this is atomic, and of course you don't expand basically. But when you have to understand how So the idea behind system dynamics is that you aggregate the view and that you consider some stocks that are macro stocks, like the flow of food production and flow of food consumption. But if you want to go down and drill down to understand what is happening at the level of food production and consumption, okay, it depends where you start from. If you start from up, of course, you already have the boundary set. But if you start from down, the more you go towards up, then the more you enlarge. Yes, exactly. Sorry, maybe I didn't explain myself properly.
Sorry.
Okay, you can ask your question.
So I was going to ask the models that you have spoken about. Do we have software packages that we can use to?
Yes.
So what are these?
Yeah, there are a few software packages. I don't want, of course, to make any, let's say, advertising for any specific one, but the most famous ones are Bensim from Ventana Systems, Stella from IC Systems, PowerSim from PowerSim Systems. Typically, these software are those that you pay a license for. There are also some other software that implement system dynamics, like, for example, NetLogo. NetLogo is a software package which is freeware, and you can implement. It's you have to hammer a little bit, but after a while it works. Or there are also other, let's say, freemium type of software, like, for example, Silico, which actually, if I had the time, I would have introduced to you. It's very simple to use, and actually, it provides the possibility to get a free account. The only limitation is that if you want to make private models, you can only have one private model. All the other models need to be public, and you decide eventually which one to keep private or public. That's the only limitation. But all the software are more or less using the same format and the same standards for modeling.
All right, thank you very much. I will hear from what comments.
So just like you mentioned, Louis people were literally living in the life they have the chance to be in the future. But unfortunately, people look down on it perhaps because of sentiments, but because of trying to take out resources, aspects of the tech, bringing about into Nigeria. It's often the case when it comes to policy design, particularly in national assembly. I'll give you one example. It's called the ranching is like called cattle ranching in Nigeria. That bill has come into national assembly about 5 years. But the problem is it always comes with sentiment against a particular tribe or culture. Is there a way to draw models and not in the sentiment aspect of it? Before sending a proposal sort of a high level area, say like the national assembly or any policy?
I think so. Well, I'm pretty sure it is, and I'm saying this because there was a paper that I was writing, and it was about the Mali crisis, and actually we were referring to the sentiment of the population in order to achieve certain situations. I think that when you have to align so different perspectives, like, for example, in eventually tribes, diverse them. I don't know how to say it in English, but yeah, diversity, etc. Human beings anyway, they all refer to the same needs of life. So we all have the need to eat. We all have the need to sleep. We all have the need to have children, to send them to school, to try to give them a better future. So if you rely and of course, I'm not saying that this should be universal concepts that are acceptable for everyone, because there could be, differences also in these universal values. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily universal, even though these ones I mentioned are probably universal because they're also physiological. But if you bring them together and start talking with transparency, like for example, with group model building sessions, where you try to align their mental models based on, let's say, primitive needs, then you can start growing up a common understanding of life and to try to solve differences. I haven't experimented it, of course, in practice. It would be interesting to experiment it.
Will you factor in the fact that sometimes with education, with enlightenment, that
Yes.
sentiments also change?
Yes, definitely so. Absolutely agree.
Boundary expansions.
Yes. Yes.
So can we have from the last two persons, yourself and the one other person? You. Okay, let's, yeah.
The model you have presented, I'm a bit curious to know the approach used for in evaluating the risk of the
Sorry, I didn't part.
I mean, the models you have presented
Yes.
during the presentation. I'm a bit curious to know the approach you use in evaluating this model.
Yes. Thank you. Shall I reply to this?
The last question.
The last
from,
one, okay, online.
Online participant is asking a question, Mr. Sunday Aban. Please, how do we in Nigeria become member of the System Dynamic Society?
Okay, let me start with the first question. You know, sometimes the modeling approach can be different. Of course, sometimes you have very quantitative, which are based on the fact that you have available data that is able to describe a behavior over time graph of a certain variable. And then starting from those data, you start identifying the main variables that could be impacted or can impact that specific area. Group model building, especially when it goes to policy, can also be an interesting approach. However, once you build a model, well, let me cite again John Sterman, all models, I mean, I think you would fly on a paper plane. And that's a model, no? Of all models are wrong, but some are useful, and in particular, they have degree of complexity that can better or describe the situation. However, once you have a model, then you have to test it and you have to validate it. And the validation is what matters the most when you go down to quantitative simulation. To validate the model, basically, there are several approaches to do it, but the most important one is that the model has to reproduce the business as usual behavior over time of your main variables. If it does that, then you are pretty confident that your model can be used also for projecting, let's say, your decisions and policies. This is a simple validation process. There are also others, and you can, of course, validate with several complex approaches, but basically this is the story. For quantitative. For qualitative, because systems thinking is also qualitative in the sense that you can use the causal loop diagrams to understand how a system works. When you try to understand how a system works, for example, after a group model building session, you get a big causal loop diagram that describes how various parts of various systems are connected, why, okay, and how they interact. Maybe you don't have all the data. Of course, if you want to go to move quantitative, then you have to find the data and then starts another process, which is to quantify the model. But only relying on the qualitative part, you can understand, let's say, the overall structure and what can explain certain dynamics. Not necessarily it would explain that, but you have a great starting point to make yourself an idea around that.
Just an addendum, please correct me.
No, please.
You're coming from the mathematics side. For SD, we are not necessarily trying to get at things.
Yes, good point.
This might not be the best tool. So, because I'll give you an example. The same model he was talking about, when we started, we went on the high level, we had to break it down, and we made a fair idea. We can't make a national model and expect it to work. We need to go down to each state, because each state has its peculiarities and how they fit into a national growth plan. Yes. So, and then we got a buy-in, and we're given some states to run a pilot. So when we went to Gombe, for instance, we went to a commissioner, and the commissioner said, okay, I've seen your model. I want you to draw me a model taking Gombe to this particular GDP over time. He obviously missed the whole point of system. You don't have to get that, but we're telling you this is what you need to do, how you need to do it, and we cannot guarantee that even if you do these things, we get to that point. So it's important when you're working on participatory level policy when you go to have that.
That's absolutely a great point. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I was mentioning the issue of marketing system dynamics models sometimes, which is another issue, no? Because if you sell something that policymakers and decision makers cannot understand, they will just not buy it. So it's very important to have good ways of marketing these models. And for example, relying on data visualization, which is the result of modeling and simulation, can be a great way. To respond to the last point, how do we adhere to the System Dynamics Society? Well, there is a website of the System Dynamics Society. You can just go there and subscribe as a member. I know that there are different membership fees for different countries depending on the income of the countries. So you can find probably the fee that is best for you. And I would also suggest anyway getting in touch with the Nigerian chapter, which is here, because maybe they also have some local activities that could, promote the dissemination of systems thinking and system dynamics, as we do, for example, in Italy with the Italian chapter. And I really welcome a collaboration among the two chapters, because I think there is mutual learning from each other, especially for your presence here on the territory, and of course, what's going on.
Let me also help.
Yes.
Professor Momo will get to me, because NACETEM's headquarters is in OAU, and we are trying to build a ferment around the work that we do. So we'll definitely get to me. The second part is Dr. Shubande. Shubanke, sorry. He's the NACETEM guy in the Systems Dynamics Society, and he will be our nucleus to ensure that we have an Abuja chapter functioning, even though it's in Lagos. We'll also ensure that the Lagos chapter also functions. With your help and the group, the OAU, which is quite a very strong group, we have ISPRI, and one of the first assignments I did was to talk to the director there. And we actually had a very good interactive session. I locked everybody out. I sat and listened to them. I didn't want any perturbation from anybody. I wanted to listen to the story between NACETEM and that center, so that I get the real thing. Sometimes decision makers are usually bombarded by people who want you to act in their own. So I allowed myself to listen to them, and I married things, and I saw that we have a good working relationship. So we'll definitely build that family, and let's all work together to be able to do something. What's most important, like Prof has told us, how do we persuade people? It's a good thing, right? You've set it up, everything looks nice on paper. How do you persuade the decision maker to take up this opportunity? So in summary, I see two things. The learning, that is the teaching for us to set up mount courses on system dynamics. The second one is the research. So with Prof, we'll be able to apply for grants that helps us to do the research. Then we will mount courses, maybe a short course on systems dynamics with help for 3 years. You know that most university vice chancellors will not sit in a program like this. You will have done opening ceremony and walked away. Interest is what's made him sit, and is listening to things that are applicable to the lives of to the life of this university. So definitely something will happen because we are having the director of academic plan just left. We will be putting heads together. We'll mount a course, of course, you hopefully
We'll be
a member
happy.
of that. Then we'll apply for Erasmus and maybe EU Horizon and see what assistance they can give us. I'm meeting with Aprodisi tomorrow, and I'll try to get them to also collaborate with us to ensure that we really precipitate this systems thinking or systems dynamic thinking. Because in the lecture, one thing I found interesting was the question, what is thinking? You know, have you imagined, you know, it's really interesting for someone to ask you what is thinking. And then you begin to realize that you have to unlearn what you already know about thinking and realize that thinking itself, it's something to think about. So thank you, Prof. I think a few more questions or suggestions are coming there. So
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
My question is, this sensitivity analysis, people process or whatever. At what point do we apply it? Is it for the sensitivity analysis that policy is not have?
Well, basically, you apply sensitivity, you do sensitivity analysis once you have a working model, and you have to understand if that model is, as the word says, sensitive to certain parameters, because that would probably tell you that if there is a high sensitivity to certain parameters, maybe either you didn't estimate them properly, or there is a problem somewhere else, and you have to understand where it is. But basically, this comes after validation and before, let's say, scenario evaluation, more or less.
I'm trying to, how do you relate it to policy?
The policy. Oh, yeah. Well, for sure, some sensitivity analysis has to be done before you put the model in the hands of policymakers. But it really also depends. As I was saying before, if you put such a complex model in the hands of policymaker, you know, out of the scratch, they just would say, okay, what do I do with this? Take it and bring it back. So the point is you have to create, how to say, interfaces, basically, you know, some graphical interface that basically can allow them to play with some levers in order to understand what happens if I do this, if I do that. You cannot really, sometimes you don't really even have to show that there is such a complex model beneath. Because they would, you know, react by saying, whoa, whoa, no. So it has to be, as again, I told, it has to be sold properly. And sometimes selling is, you know, showing less, which in the end is more. It's a big problem, but it's like that.
So there are issues that raise that cause for me to want to throw more light on the boundary chart. So I'm working on developing a sustainable energy model for the Abuja airport. And so I find the boundary charts very applicable. And now when you're developing a model, the first thing you use is the endogenous variable. Okay, so you have the endogenous variable, you have the exogenous variable, and then you have the excluded variable.
Yes.
Now, for the case of the airport, during COVID, for instance, well, the model, I had to include COVID, I excluded wars, because like during COVID, most airports were grounded. So, but Emirates didn't ground the airport, they introduced protocols. So if you want to model that, it will be very thin and it will become more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I excluded pandemic, I excluded wars. You understand? So there will be less energy usage.
Sure.
So that's why you need to talk about boundary charts. Then the excluded the exogenous variable was brought to mind the issue of ownership, because when you model when you develop the model using endogenous variable, then you subject it to different external forces. Because in my own case, the issue of ownership of the airport came to fore. But when I'm producing the model, I didn't model the exogenous variable because the ownership is going to substantially make the model behave differently. You understand? So you produce the model using the endogenous variable, then you subject it to different kinds of ownership, which is exogenous to the model. So it's important to define the variable very much.
Very well.
The exogenous variable largely has to do with political interference.
Yeah, but indeed, when you have some external forces acting, it really depends on what you're trying to solve. Because if you're looking at, for example, in that specific part, you're looking at ownership, and if you have a problem which is strictly connected to ownership, then you probably have to expand the boundary and consider that with all the things that might be connected, even if at, let's say, a very high level. I don't know how, but at least you could have some pieces of the model gets added when you have to consider some other aspects in order to verify if there are even some longer term dynamics or feedbacks that can impact back. But if you don't need to look at that problem and you need to look at, I don't know, passengers' use of toilets, I'm just saying the first thing that came to my mind, then maybe that part is not really explaining some of the dynamics that you look at for that specific problem. So in that case, you can exclude those aspects, especially because when you exclude them and you look at the toilet usage and the data you have is following the data that was projected by your model, then you might determine that probably the external aspect was not impacting. But if you have a different behavior, then that's when you start questioning yourself, okay, what didn't I include? And then you start looking at the exogenous aspects rather than implementing them as a just input, and that's it.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. A round of applause for him.
Thank you.
Leave us to keep asking questions. We may eventually leave here next tomorrow, but we have to stop at this juncture. Without wasting much of our time, we'd like to bring up on stage our host here, because if you come to a place and the host does not welcome you, I'm sure you will find the next available vehicle to return back to where you came from. But when we came, the venue was open to us, and then the host received us one. So we invite right now a round of applause. Let's welcome the President, African University of Science and Technology. You're welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, just let me just.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start by welcoming our distinguished lecturer today for, I don't know how long he's been in Abuja, but or probably this is your first time. First time. This is your first time, okay. So welcome you to Abuja, and then welcome you to African University of Science and Technology. When the DG of NACETEM hinted me about this, as soon as I heard what he wanted, what he was talking about, I said, please, with all pleasure. And the MC was talking about host, and what he probably doesn't know, maybe he knows, is that your DG is first and foremost staff of AUST. Maybe tomorrow when you hear him answer professor, he say he bought the professor. But he's been with us as a visiting faculty. Probably before I even joined AUST in 2016. And we were worried when he was made DG. And but that worry quickly disappeared, because even when he left to become DG, he still remembered that he's part of us. The only thing is that I don't think he taught the course he normally teaches. I think Dean of Engineering, was he able to teach that course last year? But we excused him. He is the person who has been teaching polymers for us, and in fact also biomaterials, and in fact all the other things we are doing. We have a very strong collaboration with the SHESCO, and all the work that the university had done in the past on biomaterials, on polymers, and a number of other things. In fact, when I joined the university in 2016, we had the Center of Excellence in Materials called PAMI, and both of us were co-center leaders. Up to the time he left. The center is still alive, but I'm sure he still remembers that the center is there. So actually, he's also the issue of host or no host shouldn't be, because this is his home. So when he whispered this to my ears while we were in, I think it was in raw materials, yes. We were holding a high policy dialogue on research funding. It's a project that AUST is collaborating with Africa Technology Policy Studies in Nairobi to see to the emergence of strong research funding agencies in 6 West African countries. That project is funded by IDRC of Canada. And so what I'm trying to say is, this is really very, very important for us. As you may well know, this university is not just a Nigerian university. It is African University of Science and Technology in the real sense of it, because everything we do is African. Our constituency is sub-Saharan. And so initially we started as a postgraduate institution, started by the Nelson Mandela Institution. With faculty, the model of this university is different from the normal Nigerian university system, in the sense that the faculty are drawn from all over the world. And I'm sure before Prof leaves, I'm going to conscript him, with or without his permission, as one of the visiting professors for this university, from what I've seen so far. The reason is that for our postgraduate programs, especially for the PhD program, the supervision is slightly different also from what we do in our normal universities in Nigeria. We have a supervisor or 2 supervisors, and then 3 to 6 members of PhD guiding committee or guidance committee. And these other ones that are members of the committee are selected from all over the world, not just Nigeria. And so the student gets the best. Okay, and we're always looking for this kind of arrangements of partnerships, networking, working with people. And so when he told me about this, that he wants the university to partner with NACETEM, I said, please, you have my approval immediately. And so I'm happy that this is happening today. And I sat very quietly listening. Personally, it just brought me back to my younger days when I did my PhD in Canada, when I was so passionate about modeling. And you see that when you look at the entire system that we are operating, that is our problem. We are not able to think in a system fashion. And while I was sitting with DG here, I told him I need application of this kind of thing. I need somebody to develop a model to help me to run this university. And he was like, what's the problem? Eh? And while he was teaching, I was seeing a lot of the problems. In fact, one example I gave him is 3 years ago when I was appointed the acting president, the issue was that, in fact, the mandate the board gave me was that the university was going down, that I should ramp up, expand programs, increase student enrollment, look for funding, and so on and so forth. And at that time, we were just about 25% capacity. Okay? COVID came and did a lot of things to us. And so our population nosedived because we're also dealing with only postgraduate students who are not teaching undergraduate. So the mandate given to me was to bring up the place. And the one thing I told them by the second meeting we had, the second board meeting I attended, I said, what you will do for me is ensure that you expand the facilities. And what I mean by facilities includes, sorry about that. Okay. It's people for the next meeting. So, and I said, if you look at, I did a little bit of what you just, I tried to show them where we are going to be in the next 2 years. They said, no, I can't achieve this in terms of numbers that they're looking for enrollment. And I say, yes, don't worry whether I can do it or not. But what I want you to do is that in the next 2 years, let me have the facilities expanded because I know we're going to get to that. Today, I was just sharing with Dr. Shola that one of the problems I'm having is, and I gave you one small example. Now, and it's because we are all thinking in linear fashions. Okay? Somebody tells me, in fact, I read this morning or yesterday in one of our platforms, some people went to a class. This is our class. And by the time they got there, another group were already there, having their class. And these people are reporting to me that somebody has taken over their class. And then on the hostel side, people are complaining. Parents are saying, you told us that our children will only be 2 in a room. Now you are trying to change them to 3 or 4. I can't accept that. And so on and so forth. Pressure on water, pressure from electricity, and so on. So, and everybody is just thinking about himself or herself. But it's only the person that is at the top. In fact, somebody told me, somebody in one case, I think it was for this happened at the Innovation Hub, which we created 3 years ago. We have a university-based innovation hub. And so we have a very good training facility there. And so now everybody wants to use that facility. And so in one of the cases, I think it was a weekend. And before now, we didn't have weekend programs. But if you come here Saturday, Sunday, you see classes going on. Not our regular students, but different short courses, training programs going on, capacity building that somebody talked about. And so somebody said, no, we've always used this for this trade. And in fact, one day there were like 3 or 4 programs going on, and there was almost physical fights over those facilities. And then each of them is sending me texts. No, you need to tell these people, you need to tell these people this, I must use this room. Then the other people are also sending me texts. And so I found that from what you have presented or what you just presented, it's like everybody is just thinking in a linear, okay, and then the person sitting on top is, now this person is telling me, make sure this person doesn't use this. He forgets that I also want that person to use the same facility. And so I said, maybe you help me build a model so that all the different components, I'll now be able to find a way to make sure that people talk to each other, people work together, people, while you are trying to achieve your own aim, you also know that there are other things that are also adding to the system to get, because at the end of the day, that thing you are pursuing is what the other person is pursuing. What I mean is for the progress of the organization. But you find in many organizations, not just African University of Science and Technology, I've actually moved around a little bit. You see this all over, in government, in research institutes, in universities, in corporate world. This issue of system thinking, that is making sure that in those our individual empires, we should all remember that we are working for what? One organization to achieve whatever the organization set as goals. And that is the basic problem of Nigeria and other African countries. He will tell you the high-level dialogue we had. What is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to have one strong research funding agency in Nigeria that can make sure that there is research funding. I once applied for a grant, and during the final discussion, they said, sorry, we are stepping this down because we feel, this is what they told me from Europe, we feel you can get this money from Nigeria. And I say, please educate me. And they started listing Dangote, all those big. Say, look around, you will find this money you are looking for in Nigeria. So they want to give the money to those who are not as endowed as Nigeria. And we got this grant to ensure that 6 countries in West Africa have research funding agencies. We started last year to implement it. Out of the 6 countries, we've succeeded in getting this happen in the other 5 countries except Nigeria. And they saw what happened during the discussions. That everybody, if you look around research funding ecosystem in this country, you notice that we have quite a number of them, led by TET Fund. That is the one called Tertiary Education Trust Fund. But we have PTDF, we have raw material, we have NACETEM. In fact, I even got a call from NACETEM saying that this thing I'm trying to do, that I want to take the fund from NACETEM. And I asked the person, when did you join NACETEM? He said, I was director of engineering in NACETEM in 2023. He said, oh, sir, I didn't know. I said, so you don't own NACETEM more than me. And you are just thinking that we want to take the money. That's not the issue. Again, it's a good example of silo thinking, not thinking about a system. And what we're trying to do is because we believe, not believe actually. Actually, I'm supposed to be in Botswana now because the AGCI group, Science Granting Council Initiative, is meeting in Botswana. And there are some money in a basket of funds that if we have a functional research funding agency, these monies will come in, and then researchers in Nigeria will have more access to funds. And all the other 5 countries, we've already recommended, and they are attending, they're all in Botswana now. I hope Nigeria is there. But what I'm trying to say is that it's this kind of thinking in silos that is our problem, even at the national level. All the examples given, transportation, okay? A big city as big as this and still expanding, we don't have a functional transport system. Some years back, you mentioned buses. We had the buses. But I'm sure if you go on a road heading to Kubwa, you see the buses all packed. Yes. So it's not that we don't know. I think our problem is all the policies, and I've been involved in developing policies and implementing some of them in this country. So we have many policies. Policy is not our problem because we have too many of them actually. But the problem is what? Implementation. And even monitoring the implementation. So if we have capacity to do the kind of things that Prof has presented, that is model these things, and I'm sure the models will now be able to help us to even track what we are doing and make correction, correct ourselves or change things as we move. It's really a problem. Somebody say we don't have resources. Who says we don't have? Is it true that we don't have resources? No. We are not able to use the resources and help ourselves. So I'm really excited, and I want to welcome all of you to the university. I invite you to visit the website, the African University of Science and Technology website. You see programs. I remember, again, looking at the system, is the regulator for universities. I program at Master Science and Technology. You have no business in public policy. Yeah, at that university. But because I had also worked in that commission, I had access to the then executive secretary. So I went to him, I got audience. I said, Oga. Oga in Nigeria means boss. I said, Oga, we are doing science, technology, engineering. Why is it that even with all the departments of electrical engineering, whatever, that deals with power, we are not able to provide power? Why is it that all the big eggheads we have in agriculture, we are not able to provide food? We are not able to apply technology for production. My training is in the agricultural sector. I'm actually an agric engineer. And yet, farmers are still battling with using hoes and machetes. So the man was looking at me. I said, the problem is policy. You need to understand policy. And then those that are in core social sciences also need to understand. We actually already have an Erasmus project we are doing with a group in. What's that your project? France. Oh, France. In Spain, yes, I think that's Spain. But he will tell you how difficult it is to just be a partner. Very, very difficult. I don't know who attended the training with me on these kinds of projects. So we had a training sometime ago. So it's very, very difficult to get, even to get a partner, because you must have an EU partner for you to. Somebody told me we write letters, they don't reply, do this. So this is really very, very important. So at least now we know we have somebody in Italy. And if we have any project, I'm saying this for all of us, no matter your agency, the agency or university or whatever, it's a very difficult thing to have partners. So this is already a very good thing for us that we are here. So please, I encourage all of us, network, because I know how difficult it is. There was a proposal we submitted recently, and I think we are looking for partners in as many African countries, West African countries as possible. And for some of them, within 2 days, we were able to get letters of support to say that they're partners. But it was because we initially had another project that connected people in those countries. So I want to encourage all of us, and from what I can see, we have people from different parastatals, different agencies of government, different in this room. And the only way we can solve our problem is for us to work together. And so I want to thank DG NACETEM and all of you for attending. Let's network. In some of the projects we do, by the way, this is a privately funded university. So every money we spend is either from, it's mostly from grants. Okay, people say that you charge high fees. When you calculate, those fees are not enough to keep this power going. Those fees that students pay. Reason is that this one, when we started 3 years ago, what we pay now for electricity is like 5 times what we used to pay like 3 years ago. I don't even want to talk about this when this goes up and we run the generators. So we need grants, and the only way to get grants is by looking for them and doing what? Writing. And you can only do it if you have networks. So I want to invite those of you from different parastatals. In some of the grants we do, they want us to partner with government people, they want us to partner with research institutes. Please, some of the staff from AUST are here. How many of us are here from African University? If you can raise your hand. Okay. A number of staff from AUST are here. Please, so that as we are putting teams, you can become part of it, like positions. And so wherever we find matching opportunities, please let us know, and you can become part of the dream that we have here, part of what is going on in this university. Initially, we were known more for publications, writing papers, publishing in Q1 journals. But we are now also moving into the sphere of innovation. And so, whatever we can collaborate on, please let us know, and we'll work with you. Already NACETEM is part of us. And a number of others. Is anybody from Space Agency here? From NASA? Okay. We have the Space Agency of Nigeria just across the road, and we've been working with them. Today we run 4 programs at master's and PhD level with them, with the Space Agency. One is in the area you are talking about, systems engineering. Is anybody from systems engineering here? I don't know.
But we have systems engineering, space physics, aerospace engineering, and GIS and geoinformatics, which we run in collaboration with space agencies. And so we believe in collaboration because we believe that that's what can make us do more than if we're standing alone. I guess that's part of system thinking, working with others. So thank you for coming. And I will end by thanking the presenter again and thanking the DG for bringing this to us and all of you for visiting the university. You are welcome to be part of us in any way as possible. You are welcome.
All right.
All right, please, can we rise for our national anthem? After that, we'll take photograph.